Hello and welcome to the Happy Debating Atheists. I am Brentley, and here with me we have Dallas. I don't know if you want me to include your last name. I don't always do that. I usually don't, just in
Go
case.
ahead. Why not?
Okay, Dallas Duff,
Roll the dice.
which is a killer name. It sounds like a superhero name, like Dallas Duff. You're secretly like the Flash or something. I don't know.
People ask me if it's they ask me if it's like a stage name, being a musician. I'm like, no, that's the name I was given.
Damn, that's awesome. Hell yeah. I do want to start out real quick. Hopefully, there's this one person that was in the chat on the last episode, and I didn't get a chance to address it, and they were asking like what the number is for the call-in show. And I don't do a call-in show. I'd love to figure out a way to do that. Maybe put the Zoom link up at some point, and then just everybody can come in and just click the link, and I'll do like one at a time or something, and just let a person in. But if it was a Catholic dude, I'm just gonna say Catholic dude because I remember Catholic was in the name. But if you do want to come on and do what Dallas is doing and just have a conversation, email me at unapologetics, spelled with an X at the end, 666 at gmail.com. Just send me an email, and we can work something out, and I'll I'll get you that link, and we'll schedule it and everything like that. But it seems like you're up late if you were watching it the other night, so this will probably be the time that we do it. But what's up, man? How you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Can't complain too much, I guess. Though we got a lot of rain here this past weekend, man. It's been like flooding everywhere. There was a couple of roads I couldn't even navigate getting around yesterday. It's been nuts, but other than that, things are all right.
Good. Yeah. You're in Tennessee, you said, right?
Yeah, Nashville.
Nashville. Hell yeah, dude. That's
Yeah.
awesome. It's like the music headquarters of America, pretty much. Right?
Yeah,
Isn't it?
everyone's moving here now. It seems like.
Right? Yeah, that's true. Isn't was it Ben Shapiro going there? He was like moving.
Yeah, his outfit is here. Technically, he himself lives in Florida, and he just kind of commutes back and forth between there and here. But yeah, the main headquarters is moved here, and a lot of their other guys have now moved here. Like I know Michael Knowles moved here, Matt Walsh moved here, and Candace Owens just moved here. She's got a new show with them.
Oh
So yeah,
yeah.
we're starting to become a conservative, mecca town here.
Right.
even though we're still very blue in terms of the metro areas, but that's true pretty much for any city. So.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works. That like the places where more people are closer together and being around other types of, different demographics all kind of shoved together, it's like tends to be more blue. And then in the rural areas where they kind of, people just don't see that many other people that look very different, and they tend to vote more conservative, you know.
Yeah, I caught what you did there. I don't accept that framing one bit. Trust me, if you're gonna sneak any premise into your argument that I think is sneaky, I'm gonna call it out.
That's fair. That's fair. I want you to. But no, before we get started, I did want to talk about this. Oh my god, everybody's freaking out about this Lil Nas X video. And you said you watched it, right?
Yeah, I watched it the other day.
Wow, it was some bizarre imagery. I got to say, like it was almost giving me flashbacks to my acid days.
I was about to
say, yeah, but I thought it was pretty cool. Like I thought it had a cool like premise and stuff like that. And the imagery, I didn't understand, I guess, all of the metaphors that he was going for there. But anytime you're doing like lap dancing on the devil, Christians are gonna lose it, dude. That's just that's the worst thing. Eminem can sing about murdering his girlfriend, and they're just kind of like, yeah, that's sort of bad. But the devil in a video, no, it's over. It's over. Turn that off, young man. Put the song about Eminem killing his wife back on. Put that one on. But what did you think about it? What was your takeaway?
Yeah, so I was trying to think, you said you wanted to discuss this a little bit, so I was trying to think about on the drive home. On my drive back home, so I was trying to ponder a few things to say about it, and All right, so there's kind of a couple different angles I guess I could approach this from. I'll start. I'll start with actually what's maybe somewhat of a critique of at least certain conservatives. I'll start from that angle and I'll work my way out from there.
There you go.
Uh, excuse me. So one thing I think conservatives sometimes are a little too quick to do, and I'm not even necessarily saying this does or doesn't apply to this particular video, but it's just a thought I've had with just kind of art and music in general, is sometimes conservatives can be a little bit quick to judge things without understanding them. So, like, just because something appears to be promoting something doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it is. It may just be your misunderstanding of it. And me being a creative person, I'm both. I'm this kind of weird hybrid of like I'm like a super creative person. I'm a very like outside the box, very creative. But I'm also like super rational, like super logical, super like kind of like I don't necessarily say I'm math brain, but I'm definitely very kind of like kind of logical. Let's walk through the steps and find the holes to the argument types. And sometimes those two types of brains don't always function together. Sometimes you get people that are way on one side and way on the other, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'm good to kind of hold the people to account that are thinking maybe too linearly, for lack of a better term. So like my number one question would be, and at this point it's an unanswered question, but it would be an interesting question as a creative thinking person, is like, what the hell is the point of all that? Like, because I think that that's an interesting question. It gets you kind of get into the mind of what's going on for the artist, but B, like it also it can also determine potentially the morality of what is being said, right? Because it's not the imagery. Like I'm one of these like people that like I'm not offended by much, and I think I don't even think it's always bad to like kind of push the limits in terms of like creative mediums, music, and television, and both with the way I have no problem with people swearing, like and oftentimes the context is going to determine whether what you're saying is good or bad or right or wrong. Anyways, so that's right. The way I would approach anything. That's the way I would look at this particular video. So as of right now, I don't actually know what the point of what that was, but I think it would be interesting to know. And maybe the point of it, because if the point of it was like maybe he's got some super nuanced, like super like thoughtful, theological, interesting like point that's being made, there may you go, wow, there's some weirdo that likes grinding on the devil, and he wanted to put that into a video, right? Like, so if that's what it was, then that's not a particularly good message.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't follow. I didn't actually read the lyrics, but from what I could catch of the lyrics, it seems like it's almost like a inner battle sort of thing, and like him just like being like, I just need a place, like a safe place where I can just be myself, even if that's perceived as evil, kind of a thing. Maybe I don't.
I will say this also too, because these two things kind of work in conjunction with each other, I guess. My presumption is actually the latter of what I said, that he's just kind of like he might be into like some weird Satanist stuff because of like because he's putting out these like Satan shoes or whatever. And then but then again, maybe he's also just maybe he's just one of these atheists that just likes to provoke people. There's that as well. Like
and that is like the Satanist thing. That's what Satanists do.
I don't discount that, but like the fact that he's like putting out these like Satan shoes or whatever, like I don't know, that kind of rubs me a little bit like maybe like he's trying to push some dark some dark satanic stuff, but I don't know that for sure.
Well, I wonder if like the if it was a woman artist doing like a similar thing, grinding on the devil, I wonder if we'd have a similar reaction. I know some conservatives would. I know some conservative Christians absolutely would. They got mad at that fucking commercial where the girl was dating the devil. You know, it was like 2020 was
Oh,
dating the devil. Remember that?
yeah,
Uh,
that was kind of funny. Some of them were. There
I
was a
thought it
couple. They
was
put out a
hilarious.
couple of them. Yeah, I thought they were amusing. Yeah, like yeah, there is a brand again to kind of criticize my own side. Like there, even though like I mean we haven't gotten into like the religious stuff yet. I mean I'm kind of in an interesting. I'm maybe not your typical religious person, but I mean, yeah, I fall somewhere in the camp of all that, and yeah, I do find people who are overly offended by that type of stuff annoying, and it's just like there's this brand of puritanicalism that's just stupid, and apparently exists a whole lot now on the left, which is one of the, and you may be critical of that. You seem like a relatively reasonable person. Like you seem like you might be somewhat critical of kind of some of the SJW we're offended by everything crowd on the left. I'm offended by it on the left. I'm offended by it on the right. Like I don't like I'm just everything offends me. Like everything is bad. I have to find it's like these people like they walk outside and they stare up at the clouds and they look for like images of racism in the clouds. Oh, look, that cloud is racist. Like
Yeah, right.
there are people I know that's a little bit of exaggeration, but there are people that leave the house with that mindset. Like they're
It
just trying to
appears
find like just
it could be easy to say that some people seem like they're looking for things to say are racist. Can we frame it that
well
way? Okay.
People are looking for whether it's racism or kind of demonic things or whatever. People are looking for. They're looking to point it out. Like there are people on the religious side that like everything's the devil. There's like the Bobby Bush. It's like the water boy, the mom from the water boy.
Yeah.
Right, like foosball is the devil, right? I mean, and there are, I mean, that joke works for a reason because there are people that, even though, I mean, they're taking kind of a comical approach to that and taking it to a somewhat ridiculous limit. There are people that are fairly ridiculous in the way that they, walk around and think everything's the devil and everything's affected by the devil. The devil's going to get you, and there's way too much of that, like on the Christian right. I mean, there's plenty of like more rational thinking Christians as well. So I don't want to say that like that our side is totally representative of that. But yeah, there's a lot of it. And then there's I don't like it. I'm not a fan of all that.
Right. Oh, okay. So yeah, all right. So you're more of like a middle of the road. I mean, not middle of the road, but like you're not super like you're not triggered by the things that like the ultra religious would be triggered by.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I would use. I understand what you're saying, like, but I wouldn't. I don't know if I would use use that phraseology because I think there are people who are ultra religious in some sense that have a much more like rationalist approach. It's like they're super into their religion, they're super devout about it, but they don't their outlook is more reason based than it is like like outrage based or the devil's going to get you and all that stuff.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I think people give the devil like way too much credit, and even into like even when you get into like you really think about some of the theological premises behind Christianity. The whole idea of giving the devil like all this credit that certain people do, like it doesn't even it's not even a coherent theology when you think about it, because like a lot of the premises behind kind of the biblical doctrines are there's a heavy emphasis on free will, right? Like human being and judgment, right? Because the only way judgment can be just is if you have a reasonable amount of free will ability, and granted, like I think there's a complexity to this whole free will issue, like which is something we could get into if you want or don't want to. But
yeah, we can pull up that thread. I like that one. That one's fun.
Sure, yeah. I think there's some complexity to that issue, but if any degree of free will exists, right, then judgment is only fair if that is kind of the baseline, right? Like, so if these people that are like, oh man, like the devil's everywhere and the devil's manipulating everybody, and even the like possess, like there's some people that think like you know people get possessed all the time and I'm not even saying that can or doesn't happen. I'm not. I really have no opinion about that whatsoever, because I've never really had any action with it, so I don't really have an opinion about the whole like demon possession thing. But
I would say
anyways,
it's
like
bullshit, but of course, right?
right, yeah.
So
But
it's very indicative of mental illness. Usually, it was the explanation for mental illness. Back before we had an explanation for mental illness. So, but yeah, I feel you.
but yeah. Anyways, but my primary point is when you give the devil that much credit, what you're doing is you're further eroding this idea of free will. The more you erode the idea of free will, the more the idea of moral judgment upon you becomes absurd, right? Like,
Right.
so it's like, and I don't think a lot of people are kind of processing these things like in order. And I see this both in like a lot of religious communities, but I'm seeing it a lot in like the atheist secular world these days too. It's basically this incongruency of holding two ideas that kind of oppose each other at the same time, right? This kind of like cognitive dissonance type of thing, if you will.
Sure.
I used to, because I grew up in more religious circles, so I was very early on, kind of as I became an adult, I was seeing a lot of that and very critical of that. And I thought, oh well, atheists they must be like more rational. And then
It depends. It depends on the atheist so much. Like, there's atheists that believe in crystals, man. There's atheists that believe in fucking ghosts. I mean, it's only addressing one thing, a god. And so, but all the other shit's up for grabs. I mean, Bigfoot, aliens, fucking spirits. Like, it doesn't, what I mean? So it's like, because I've met some pretty irrational atheists in my time, just within the past 5 years that I've, been doing this,
Yeah, and I feel like it's getting worse.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I could see that, because I feel like a lot more people are leaving, and I think more people are leaving religion, but they're not necessarily getting to rationality. You know what I mean? They're not getting to being reasonable. I would say, or a good skeptic is what I would call it, because I try to be a good skeptic. But it's hard. It's hard. Your brain wants to fuck with you all the time. That's what it is. You just got to recognize the pitfalls of your brain. You know what I mean? And it's hard to do. I can't do it perfectly. My brain's probably more fucked than most people's, So, but yeah, now I remember there was one thing, and I did want to ask you about it because I found it fascinating. You were on a thread on the Right to Reason podcast, where he had done a morality debate, and you were kind of going through some of what you were because it was about, what was it, objective morality, right? And about the existence. Do you believe in objective morality? Do you think there's that's a possible way to do that?
So here's how I've kind of approached this, and it's kind of a little bit of a backdoor approach, but so I do consider myself kind of a hyper rationalist and kind of an anti-dogmatist. Now that doesn't mean there are some premises that I hold that I kind of feel like I have to take a leap of faith on, because you just kind of eventually you kind of just run out of places to go, and I think that works for both sides. But anyways, yeah. So objective morality. I look at objective morality from this standpoint, and this is kind of reverse of how most people look at it. So, well, first off, I think most people, whether they're religious or not religious or whatever, they believe that they believe in absolute right and wrong. And I know this because because even the atheists assert their morality upon me like it's absolute, right? I'll say something and they'll be like, oh, you're so immoral for, like, you're just wrong, your morality is absolutely wrong. So I know pretty much for a fact the majority of people, whether you're religious or not religious, basically function the way that they talk to people and that the way that they think is in those terms. Most people think in terms of objective morality. I think that's true whether or not it exists or not. So
well, they might. I
I
mean, but what they might see it as being objective, but that's their subjective purview, right? I mean, because that you
well
could
only
be absolutely immoral according to one person's moral code, right? And they're like, that's absolutely
well
wrong because I got that rule and you just broke it. You know what I mean? Kind of thing.
sure. Well,
I
what's
mean,
interesting is some of them approach it from that standpoint, and some of them will admit that, but a lot of them won't. Because people, I think people are so attached to their moral worldview that like they don't want to give it up in the sense that like they don't want to have to concede that it's just their opinion, like because then it doesn't become this greater thing, like then it just becomes my opinion, and everyone has a fucking opinion, right? Like
yeah.
so
They're
like
like
what does it
assholes,
really
right?
yeah,
Everybody's got one and they
exactly.
all stink.
Yeah, right. So, so anyways, like, and I approach it from the standpoint that I accept that premise too. I accept that I absolutely believe that there are certain things that are fundamentally right and wrong. And so then part of my religious worldview actually comes as a consequence of me accepting that premise, right? Like, because I think a lot of religious people look at it in the inverse way. Like they start off with like the kind of the dogma and the religion, and then they think about their approach
They,
to morality.
yeah, they work backwards.
Uh,
They're like, here's the rule, and then they work backwards as to okay, here's why that rule is okay. But they started with the
yeah,
premise that the rule is that is absolute, like you were saying earlier, like this is
yeah,
absolute morality, and then I'm just rationalizing why it's absolute kind of afterwards, right? Is that what you mean?
yeah. Yeah, that's more or less it. Yeah. Me personally, I kind of think about kind of my morality. I kind of rationalize through all that first, and then I think, well, the only way I can assert that there is an absolute morality, even whether or not I'm right or wrong about everything. In fact, I'm not arrogant enough to think that literally every single moral precept I hold, if assuming if there is an absolute objective morality that exists. I don't even pretend to assert that I'm 100% correct in everything, but I do at
That's
least
good.
still
That's
kind of
good. That's kind of unusual for a lot of people. People don't seem to want to admit that we can't be 100% correct about everything. And for the most part, I
yeah
would say I can't be absolutely certain that I'm correct about anything. So
yeah.
it's
But I still believe in objective morality exists. And I kind of get my religious worldview starting from that premise. Like, so it's like if an objective morality exists, the only way that it can exist is if there's an objective kind of moral arbiter in some way, shape, or form, right? Like in the religious community would view that as a god in some sense. It's like you die and there's a separate kind of spiritual realm, and that is where God is. And and God has his moral precepts and that
mhm.
he judges by, and all these things. And we'll either all find out that this exists, or we won't. Like the only thing that bugs me about atheists is if they're right. We'll never all know it, but
I mean, I think I feel the same way about Christians. Like, there's no way we'd all know it. I mean, I guess unless we
well,
all died and end up
if
going to heaven or hell or
yeah,
whatever, right?
but if
But
the I don't
we'd
even
all be
just say
dead.
Christianity. But if any form of spiritualism, in terms of like you have and a soul existing like after the death of your physical body, like if that, and I always try and use the presupposition of if, because I think it's important to kind of start from that premise, because again, I'm not arrogant enough to claim that I know. And that's another thing that annoys me about a lot of religious people, is that a lot of them claim absolute certainty of these things, which to me is like the height of arrogance. Though I hear plenty of arrogant statements from atheists as well, but
Oh,
like
yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and anyway.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But
They there is a lot of because like a lot of people, a lot of atheists will take the strong atheist position, and I find that to be almost just as unreasonable as the the strong theist position, where you're just like, I know that there's a God, and it's like if you're saying I know that there's not a God, it's like, dude, what if there's like a God out in the cosmos somewhere and it just hasn't been demonstrated to exist yet? That's why I always
yeah,
say, if a
well,
cult comes out tomorrow and demonstrates that their God exists under scientific scrutiny, I still wouldn't be wrong. I never would have been wrong this whole time, because all I said was, I don't know, but I'm not convinced that God exists. But now I am, because they demonstrated it under scientific scrutiny. And so, hey, here we are. I believe it. Whether I worship it or not is a whole nother fucking conversation. But as far as like me being a theist now, yeah, it's proven to be true. Therefore, I am now a theist because of them being able to demonstrate it. But I never would have been wrong any time before that, because I always just said and admitted I don't know, but I'm not convinced, and all the evidence that's been presented to me for the existing gods that have been presented are not, it's not good. It's not good. It falls to pieces real quick, you know. But
yeah, and then that's fair enough. The way I think about like the whole like God thing too is that like is if the way I think about kind of what the fundamental premise is of God, which is like it is God would be this spiritual entity, which the thing that the thing that annoys me that in some of these conversations is the way atheists will sometimes nitpick things to where like they know what you're talking about, but like they play stupid. Like when I say like when I say like like a spiritual realm or whatever, they're like what is that? Like how do you demonstrate it? Like I'm like, first off, conceptually, first off, I'm not claiming I can demonstrate it. Secondly, like you know what it is conceptually. You're just trying to be annoying, like and trying to get me like this somehow like like pinpoint it the way I can something scientifically.
right.
Which obviously
Well,
I
I
can't, and
yeah, I
I
think
don't
the
claim to.
reason they do that is because most of the time when people try to actually talk about what the spirit realm would entail, it ends up just being them making up shit. And they're just trying to get you to do that. You know what I mean? Because once you start making up shit, well, I think that it's like this, and they're just light, and they're up maybe in the spectrum of light that we can't see, but they exist and they influence us somehow. Okay, how do they influence? And then you can start needling at those points, right? Because it's
Sure.
sort of just this baseless platitude that we kind of throw out while we're just like, yeah, there's a spiritual realm. And it's like, okay, but how does it function? Well, I think that it functions like, and that's when you can really fuck with them. You know what I mean? Because you're getting more
Well, if they're
specific.
pretending, yeah. Well, if they're pretending to know exactly where it is or exactly how it functions, then yeah, I think that's fair enough. But like, yeah, I think it's reasonable enough to have disagreeable conversations and kind of understand what we're talking about, like conceptually. Like what a spirit realm would be conceptually. It would be around that is just the way I would personally like try and define it. If I had to, would be, I mean, it's a realm that is separate from the material realm. Well, then they'll
But
get into,
equal.
oh, okay,
No.
how can anything exist that isn't material? Which is like, dude, I don't fucking know that. Like, you know,
That's
it's like,
that's see that's where it gets tough, because anytime you start breaking it down, that's where it's like, okay, what about this? What about that? And you just like, then you just start making stuff up. You know what I mean?
but
Because it's all
the
the
thing that's
individual. It's all about the
well,
individual and what they
but it's not
think
even
about the.
oh yeah, well, it's not even as much making stuff up as it's like it's professing something that like, okay, like I believe in this thing conceptually, even though I can't prove it exists. That doesn't mean like I'm I'm necessarily making it up. I can understand how people would understand it to be that, because it's not something that you can quantify or count, or
or
any of
measure.
these like
You can't
kind of
measure it.
scientific.
It's
Do what?
you can't measure it. There's no way to
Yeah,
determine if it. I mean, if we can't determine it's actually here, then it becomes really difficult to talk about any details about it. And it seems like the
well, yeah,
details
and
just
I
get
wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't.
just
I
change
personally
depending
wouldn't
upon the
try and.
person.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't try and do that. Like I said, like the last thing I want to do is claim to know anything that I don't know. So if something's like belief based,
Mhm.
I think that it needs to be said from the onset.
Mhm.
Um, but
No, that's good
one thing
though.
I
That's
wish.
good.
Yeah,
That's
but one
very
thing I wish
reasonable.
atheists. Yeah, I wish one thing I wish atheists would concede a little more, and I'd be curious, like, kind of your personal thoughts on this. Like, but
Sure.
is that the whole concept of just our existence and the existence of the universe in general, and it's both in its function and its order, and even the systems that exist. Like, I mean, just even the system of evolution. Like, even because I think religious people are missing the point when, like, whether the ones that like don't believe in evolution. I think it's they're missing the point when they try and present evolution as this kind of like this kind of binary thing, where it's like it's either evolution or like kind of
My
creation,
God,
in the
it's
sense of
my God
that, like,
revolution.
yeah. But like what those people kind of fail to analyze is that, like, even like evolution is a system, right? Like it's a system of function. It's like this intertwines with this, and it creates this, and then it leads to this, and that leads to this, and then and it's very interesting. It's very complex, and it's very ordered in a certain sense of the word. So at
Absolutely.
least
Yeah.
yeah. So anyways, like, I wish atheists would concede a little more that, like, the fact that this could exist without any type of workable hand that's basically kind of putting these pieces together, it's like there's no way to comprehend how that could even. It's a giant mystery as to the how,
Right.
all of this could come about, and
It
I
is.
think
It is a
yeah.
mystery, and that's I think is the toughest part for most people is that it is a mystery, and the thing is, once we start and I think this might be why atheists do this is like because we don't really know what it was that kicked off like everything, like what uh things specifically happened in order to create our universe. We have some good ideas. We have a lot of evidence for, and there's some hypotheses as far as abiogenesis goes, but we don't have anything conclusive, that we can say this is a fact, we figured that out, boom, that's done, that's in the chamber or whatever, uh we don't have any of that, so it's a lot of just speculation. And I think for my position is that it's just there's any way you look at it, it's going to be speculation, whether it's a mind that did it or if it's just natural processes. So far all we have is natural processes to be able to identify and be able to work with and stuff, and there isn't any demonstrable being that that has, that we can show did anything. And so after that it's just all speculation, you know what I mean? And so it's to me it's more reasonable to just go, I don't know. I get how you got that question and that you feel like you need to answer it because it's a big question, and it's like it's on all of our brains, to go, why are we here? I get that. But at the same time, if we just land on a conclusion, it's extremely irrational because we need to reserve belief until there's evidence that, that warrants a belief, right?
Well, I think it's I think we probably agree on this point. I would think, but I think it's the certainty on both ends that drives us further apart. It's the certainty that there is a God and the certainty that there is no God. Like those two things are really kind of really polar to each other. They really pull apart. But I think where what would be more reasonable and where we could come together a little bit more and have a little more understanding for each other would be as if we could people on both sides of the theist and atheist fence could start from the premise that that there's no absolute knowledge of how these things of how we came about, how this came about, and that that there's a mystery to it, and we at the end of the day we come to different either conclusions or even hypotheses. I prefer the word hypotheses because that's the way I think about it, more as a hypothesis than a conclusion. But I feel like it would be best for both sides if we could do a little more of that.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you actually there, because I don't like I said, like and I'm constantly correcting people about when they say, "Oh, I have a theory about this." I'm like, "It's been demonstrated to be true. Like, have you tested it?" Like, like I'm just meaning like colloquially. I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to be a dick. I just have to deal with this all the time. But but yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, because conclusions, I guess it would have to be like you like I was just saying, like it'd have to be conclusive. So I guess you're right. Yeah. You don't want to come to conclusion. And I think our brains just naturally have a hard time doing that. Our brains have a hard time not landing on a conclusion. It wants an answer. It wants to know a thing and then move on. And it's real
Mhm.
fast about the matter. It's just like, can we just decide that it's this and move on? And you're just like,
Right.
no, no, okay, because we don't know. We don't have the reasons to believe that that's true. So I'm sorry, brain. You're going to be maybe a little uncomfortable for a minute, but no, we don't know. So let's not, land on a conclusion about this, and it's tough, and I think that's kind of what drives the whole religious thing, and people have just figured out how to capitalize on it and monetize it, really, But yeah, yeah, it's an interesting conversation. And back to real quick, back to like what we were talking about with objective morality. Do you have an objective? Because that's sort of a crux, right? Like that's like what you kind of need. We would need an objective, right, for
Well,
morality in order for it to
so
be
objective morality as the way I would understand it and the way I would use the term. So you would have subjective morality, which would mean morality is just determinative by each individual, and it's like I have a certain moral view and you have a certain moral view, and neither one of us are technically correct. There's no correct answer. It's just it's your opinion of morality versus my opinion of morality. That's subject. Objective morality would be that there is whatever terminology you want to use. So like you say something and I say something, and one of us is right and one of us is wrong. That would be kind of how objective morality, the concept of objective morality works, right? So I hear atheists try and argue all the time that objective morality is functionable. The idea can't exist without some sort of God or kind of higher moral authority. And the only way I can figure, first off, I don't know what they're talking about when they say that, because there must be a disconnect on language. That's the only thing I can figure, but we must not be
probably.
talking about the same thing, because I mean, purely logically speaking, I'm not talking about proof of a God or anything, just purely logically speaking, the only way I can even conceive that the premise would is be workable is if there is an actual authority. So like let's say let's say you and I were playing a board game, and we either lost the instructions, or it didn't come with instructions or whatever. So we're playing this board game, and we're like, well, we don't like technically know what the rules should be, so let's make up the rules. And you come up with a set of rules, how to play the game. Then I come up with a set of rules to play the game, and maybe one of those is more functional than the other. Uh, but anyways, that's somewhat beside my point.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
So that's kind of subjective morality. So the objective morality, if we're relating it to this analogy, would be who determines what is the more correct rules. It's the person who made the game, right? The person who created the game, or has official legal authority that says I am either the owner of the game or the owner of the rights of this game. Therefore, I officially it's right. There has to be an official. There has to be some sort of official that says I am the judge of this. That's how the objective morality concept kind of has to work. There has to be an arbiter of the rules. Otherwise, the rules are just determined subjectively.
Sure. Okay. That makes good sense. I'm gonna pull from Matt Dillahunty here real quick. But I feel like because you brought up the game, uh, and the rules I think can change, but the fact is that if we agree on a particular goal, right, and this can get messy. Don't get me wrong. It can get messy when you get down in the mires of it, but if we agree on a goal, which is like the well-being of everybody, right? If we agree on that as a goal, right? Of the game, of like you're saying, like a game, it can be like a game because we can objectively determine, like if we were playing a game, I mean, I guess the rules of the game would matter, but as long as we agree on the game that we're playing, right, and that we're both trying to reach a mutual goal, then we can objectively determine what's a better or worse move within that game, right?
Right, but that's still not that still doesn't that's still only I appreciate the premise, and I think it's a workable premise, like in like a pragmatic sense, like but that still doesn't solve the problem of subjective versus objective morality. That just means that subjectively we have come to an agreement about how to play the game. That doesn't
Well,
mean officially that we're correctly playing the game. It just means the people currently playing the game have come to some sort of agreement. That's all that means. It doesn't solve the subjective
okay. Well, I
objective
mean,
problem at all.
so I mean, the reason that morality exists, and this is why, like, I would, disagree with you here, is the fact that the reason that morality exists in the first place is because we are a social species. We've evolved to realize that hey, things work better if I work with other people and I don't hurt other people, and because we're a social, and we've over time have developed a sense of morality just because we're around one another and we're trying to figure out how to best be around one another, right? And that's sort of the
Uh,
premise
well,
of the game, right? That we're talking
well,
about.
you in order for me to agree with that, I have to presume a premise that I don't necessarily agree with, right? That's the kind of like the atheist premise, right? Like,
Well, it's what's
so
demonstrable, like through science and whatnot.
wait, what is
So, I
demonstrable?
mean, even if we like both of us acknowledge that we don't know how we got here. We don't know, if there is or is not a ultimate lawgiver. Now, if we both can admit that we don't know whether or not that's the case, then the only people that can decide what morality is us, right?
Well,
And
we
so it would be what's best for us, and we can use that as a basis for the rules of the game.
well, I mean, yeah, in some sense, that's right. I mean, we have to decide. I mean, every individual has to decide what they think is right and wrong, and then those individuals, find ways of, formulating, coming together, and working together. And one of the reasons why we have different societies is because people agree to different rules, and sometimes those are moral rules. So obviously people are gonna disagree on what is morally correct. That we can agree on.
But isn't
But
the ultimate goal the well-being of everybody?
yeah, I mean that would be one of the goals. That would definitely be, yeah. I mean that would be a fairly primary goal.
What would be some of the other ones?
Though, well, let me before I think about that, like,
No, it's
yeah.
all
So,
right.
what one thing I will point out is that a certain significant percentage of people who make this claim about like well-being of others, like, often don't practice often don't practice that very well, even sometimes in their when their intentions are good. And this can relate back to kind of some political stuff too.
Sure.
Like one of the primary reasons I'm more conservative than I am anything else is because, well, both from kind of a pragmatism, but also too, like, from kind of like a wisdom perspective, right? Like, 'cause I think uh, conservatives, even sometimes when they're stodgy, they're a little more wise than the other side. I think like there's a lot of
Hold
good
on real quick?
intention.
What's stodgy? I've never heard of stodgy. That's got an
Yeah, I mean,
AOUGH
they're
in
just
it,
kind
doesn't
of
it?
like, they're just a little bit like tight and stuck up and like a little too like rigid. Maybe rigid be a better word.
Ah, okay, okay. No, your word's fine. I just had never heard it before. That's cool.
Yeah,
Now I'm probably gonna hear it like 17 times in the next week, so that's fine. That's how that
yeah,
works.
uh, yeah. But so my main critique of people on the left, politically. And I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm trying to
That's
keep a through line here.
No, you're
but
good. You're good. I jump all over the place. It's good.
but but I think that it relates to what we're talking about. But yeah, it is that I think it's not that they lack good intentions. Like, I think there's a lot of good intentions on the left. I think that part of the problem becomes that, like, that it's moral outcomes, right? I think that the outcome is more important than the intent. I would hope that's something we can agree on, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
so it's not about
I'm a
what you
consequentialist. Yes.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think a lot of there's a lot that's produced by the secular world and the left world and the atheist world, where they profess these things about the well-being of humanity and all these things, and sometimes their ideas, even with their good intentions, don't necessarily produce these outcomes that they desire. So that yeah, so there are other things to consider too. Um, and like, also, even in specifically these things about like well-being, it's like, okay, the well-being of whom? Like, what do you mean by? Are you talking about specifically the well-being of just human beings, or the well-being of animals as well? Like, because then that gets into an interesting conversation. It's like, and so then if we're talking about animals as well, like, what does that entail? Like, like, and should this morality somehow also apply to animals, or do they get a pass because they're not like smart enough to like apply these ideas? I mean, then you can start kind of going down
Right.
this trail,
Well,
kind of
I
breaking,
I would
yeah,
generally
breaking this
say
stuff down.
that it would be interspecies because like I wouldn't go down to a bunch of apes, that are roaming in packs and there's like one ape that's like hurting other apes and they cast him out, right? They like cast him out of the pack or whatever. I wouldn't come down and be like, "Hey guys, what the fuck? Bring him back. Get him back here. You stupid apes. You're doing this wrong." You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't do
Sure.
that, because it's not the same species. Like generally when we're talking about morality and specifically objective morality, we're generally talking about our own species because you're right. It can again, like that's what I was saying, it can get really muddy in the mire. Like when you get down into it, and it becomes more of like a case by case basis. Like should somebody hurt their cat because they crapped on the floor? No, like, I'd be against that, and I feel like that is a moral decision, right? But
Yeah, but
it
well,
is where it
the more
gets muddy in the
complicated
mire.
question is
You know?
the more complicated question becomes if the human being who owns a cat becomes starving, is it okay to kill and eat the cat? Like, that's a more interesting
That's a
question.
good point.
Um,
Probably if the human is starving, I would say that is maybe not necessarily moral, but it is justified in that particular case. because it's a case by case basis. We can't, and that's the other thing that makes it messy is that morality, it's a case by case basis, because somebody might want you to kill them because they're in an extreme amount of pain and they're probably going to die anyway, and so that I would say is a moral, uh, a moral decision to say, okay, take this person's life because they want it. And, that seems completely antithetical to well-being, but at the same time, it doesn't, because that person was suffering. So it makes it really, it can get muddy, and like, you know, and you really kind of have to, and it's messy. And that's the thing about reality, is it's never clean. It's never easy. It's never just this is right and that is wrong. Like it's always something that you have to evaluate and really come to a conclusion on, where you're like, hey, this seems like the most right thing to do, you know, because we're always, I feel like, guessing this.
But so the question I would ask probably most atheists around this particular issue is kind of a challenge. Well, let's kind of go back to the kind of the killing the cat or the dog or whatever
Yeah.
it might be.
Okay.
So like, yeah, so let's say you have a dog, and you're starving, and you go to the decision. Okay, I'm gonna kill this dog. I'm gonna eat this dog. So most atheists would reluctantly, I think, say, well, okay, and I think they would prioritize the human species. So here would be my challenging question related to that. Are you making that statement based upon just purely selfish motivations, like, well, I'm a human, and so therefore I'm best? Is it based on that, or is it based on something else? And if it is based on some other premise, then what is that other premise that you're basing that on?
No, I would totally just base it off of that premise. Like, I am a human, and my morality would base me amongst human well-being, and that would be the goal. That I evaluate the consequences of my actions to make sure that there's the best human well-being. And yeah, and so in that instance, again, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily moral, but I would say that it's justified in that instance.
But I don't think you're quite addressing my question.
I'm
The
sorry.
question really relates to the not necessarily would you make that decision, would you prioritize human beings, but why are you prioritizing human beings? Like, are you, like I
Oh,
said, are you doing it because is it just a purely selfish thing, admittedly, or is there some other premise that you're working off of?
well, yeah, because I'm a human being, and I would base my morality off of being a human being around other human beings, and that's generally how we do,
Right.
get our morality. So
So
yeah, I would
so
say
it's
it is selfish in that sense, but I mean, I feel like all morality is selfish at the end of the day because of the imperative. It's like, if I make a decision to do something, good or bad, right? Then if it's bad, right? If I'm being harmful, then I'm promoting that to other humans, which means they can now use that justifiably against me, right? So then
well,
I'm
I mean,
promoting an idea that can be used again to harm me at some point. So I mean, all morality is selfish at the end of the day, if you
uh,
actually think about it. The
yeah, I wouldn't
selfless
accept.
morality thing is not necessarily accurate.
I mean, I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't accept that premise. I would be interested to hear more extrapolate on that idea, because I haven't heard that argument made too often. But because I mean, there obviously is a such thing as, like, real true altruism, right? Which would be kind of probably one of the highest acts of morality, to where you're doing something not only to benefit someone else, but that it actually has a negative effect on you, right? Like if you gave away if you had a bunch of money, or any money for that matter, and you gave it all away to something or someone else, or if you give your life for someone that you care about. Like, I mean, these are like kind of ultimate acts of altruism. They have really no benefit to yourself, or at least not a total benefit, or maximal benefit. Like,
Right.
so I mean, that's
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like I would take that almost, and this is a very, very mild version of it, but it's a good way to tell who somebody is the grocery cart test, right? So like when if you heard about that, it's
I think I know what you're gonna say.
yeah, it's if you put if you do, there's nothing that requires you to do it. Like you don't have to do it. You're going out of your way to inconvenience yourself, right? To put the cart back where it's supposed to be in the little cart thing with the the brails and all that, and you put it in there. But you don't. There's nothing that says that you have to do that. There's nobody that's over you saying that's going to get upset about it, because it's just so common to not do it. But if you do it, then I feel like it's a pretty good demonstration that like exactly what you were just saying, like, even in just the lowest form that it is, it's just an inconvenience, but still, it's an inconvenience you don't have to have. You can just put the shit right next to your car and just drive away and nobody's gonna give a shit. You know what I mean? So
Sure. I mean, I think on the issue of morality in general, like whether you're atheist or Christian or whatever you might be, like I think the most important thing is to have some sort of consistent framework that you're working off of that makes some kind of moral sense in the way that I would at least understand morality. And I think like one of the problems that may exist in kind of our more secular parts of our culture is that I don't think there's not enough actual actual kind of you know like character based education. Let's say as an example, right? Like I think developing your as an individual, like your moral character, I think is like one of the most important things both you could do as an individual person, but also too for the benefit of society. And I see too much focus on external wrongdoings, right? Like I feel like I see way too much of that. Like people get way too focused, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with like pointing out or having some degree of attention to external wrongs or external immoralities, if you will. But like
that
I
would,
just see
like,
so
by
much.
external, you mean like affecting other people and not just yourself?
Um, no, no. I mean external more meaning like from the larger social problems as a social immoralities things that are going on in the culture that or the particularly like the systemic stuff like, oh, this is systemically like wrong or immoral, whatever. Like we can both admit that like slavery and Jim Crow and all this stuff are systemic immoralities, and obviously those are things that do need attention. Um, but you know how none of that you could have a society where none of that stuff would even exist to begin with. What would be is if you had enough people that had a good moral framework as individuals and had good moral teachers that taught them how to function as good moral individuals. You would never have that stuff in the first place. And I'm not saying we
Yeah.
can't even create that perfect society where everyone's perfect and there are no problems. I'm not making
Right.
that argument
Because
even
that's
in the slightest. But
it's a whole lot to ask for us to be able to govern an entire society based on everybody raising their kids perfectly. Like we have to assume that kids aren't being raised the best.
well,
Just
yeah,
just
well, yeah.
as
That
just an
assumption.
an understandable thing that happens within a society. And so knowing that knowing that happens, going, I don't give a shit what happens to them, is kind of weird. Like you'd have to be like,
That's not the point at all that I'm
they
making. I'm
dug
not.
their
I'm not.
own grave or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it kind of it makes it so that. But I'm just saying that's why the left a lot of times looks at things a bit differently. To whereas like right, a lot of times on the right, that becomes the whole focus. Well, if their families were just like good Christian families and like actually raised their kids right, this wouldn't happen. And that's demonstrably false. Like we know that's not necessarily true. And the left kind of goes, okay, that would be the ideal, but we have to recognize that that's probably not going to happen for most people, and or for even I mean, for like half of the people or whatever. And so what do we do with everybody else? We just let them fall to the wayside, or like how do we acknowledge that you know all the kids aren't being raised that great? How do we deal with this societally that leads to the best, most, the best outcomes, that for the well-being of everybody.
Right. Well, part of our disagreement from the left and the right is we disagree on what even well, let's say policy wise, leads to and creates the best outcomes in the first place. That's really our biggest problem. Like, I think from the left, that's our biggest divide, because it's one thing to kind of disagree on kind of certain, like, oh, you want this tax rate and I want this tax rate. That's one thing. People are going to disagree on tax rates, but it's
Sure.
another thing to it's a completely different thing to do to not even understand that for person A to think that that a certain policy is going to lead us in a good direction, and then person B looks at that same policy, and not doesn't necessarily disagree with the policy based upon the intent, but like they see it and they go that policy is not going to take us in that direction. In fact, it's going to take us in a wrong direction. So that's how we view each other oftentimes, right? Like I totally understand that. Like,
Yeah.
you probably view my policy ideas in that way, and I view your policy ideas in that way, and maybe through some debate we can hash some stuff out. But it does become difficult in this era that we live in, because it's like it's so easy, it's so difficult to find good information, and to find it's like we live in two different realities half the time, because it's like we don't know what's we don't know what's correct and what's incorrect, and
But you got to see, like, a lot of times people are trying not to find what's correct, and trying to figure out how what they'd already like to be true can be correct.
well, yeah, that's true.
You know
That's
what I
definitely
mean?
true on both. Yeah, that's a lot of that on both sides. That's what commonly referred to as confirmation bias, right? Like, so
Yes,
that
exactly.
that's and it takes a truly conscious effort to try and sift through that, and try and avoid getting too much into your own, like, confirmation bias. Just you and I think most people they just kind of filter into their own little bubbles, and they don't even understand how much confirmation bias they're getting, because they're not being challenged enough, and
Yeah. You have
and
to be
all
able
that stuff.
you have to work to recognize it. It's not easy.
Oh yeah, I
I
agree on.
do it. I do it all the time, dude. Like, and I'm constantly going, hold on, is that a fucking am I just doing the confirmation bias thing? Am I just like saying I'm right because and I'm constantly having to do that. But when you have people that refuse to even acknowledge the concept that they could be wrong, that's a difficult place to be. I think that's why you're actually our conversations are so interesting, is because you don't have that. You still have the right leaning thing, but it seems to me like and I'm not putting you. I don't want to like put you in the same box I put in all the other people that like the Marjorie, because I'm constantly, and it's so weird. It's like I'm constantly in the Marjorie Taylor Greene comment section, on Twitter, and it's like all these people, they're just like so sure that the vaccine is the antichrist, it's the mark of the beast and all this stuff, and it's like I feel like someone like you would recognize, like, that's probably not true, because I could be mistaken about something, and this is clearly something
Right.
that's being kind
Well,
of
I will.
told to me to
Oh,
think, and not something that
the
I'm actually thinking.
yeah, the one comment I'll make about that is, while I agree that that's probably not the case, I will also say, and I've made this comment, like, publicly, before, and I'm not even that comfortable with, like, making too many. super like I'm not super into like quoting scripture and all that kind of stuff. Like, but I have found that I'm becoming more and more like into not necessarily like quoting scripture, but like thinking in like biblical terms. Like for example, like for the majority of my life, I've heard about this concept. I mean, I went to a Christian school growing up, so I think you hear a lot about this That's like I grew up in the era of like the Left Behind series, where like the Kirk Cameron, like
Me too, dude.
yeah,
Yeah,
we would watch,
absolutely.
we'd have to watch all those movies and stuff. So it's like yeah, I was kind of brought up with a lot of these pumped into my psyche, and I've kind of just like neglected a lot of it as just like hooey. Lately I've started thinking. I was like, because my main reason for kind of brushing it off is because I just thought pragmatically, like these ideas that they talking about, like it just seems like this stuff seems like just too sci-fi. It doesn't seem like it would ever happen. Like the government's never gonna government, especially like the American government, because we're based on freedom, right? Like
Right.
they're never gonna force us to get some kind of mark on us or get something injected into us that that if we don't get it, we're not going to be able to buy and sell goods, which is kind of that's the whole mark of the beast premise. Like you get some type of the government essentially forces you to get some type of mark on your body or whatever that where if you don't get the mark, you cannot engage in commerce, right?
Right.
And there's that type of
but it's because Christians aren't like they refuse to get the mark of the beast. So now everybody can buy and sell except Christians. That's sort of isn't that the premise? Because like all the Christians know that this is the mark of the beast, and therefore they should not get the mark of the beast. And so now the rest of the world, and it's the world too. Keep in mind according to the prophecies and stuff, he has united the world and he's taken over it, and now he's ordering a mark of the beast. And none of the other things have taken place, Like,
no, yeah, I mean,
so it's like
I totally agree with what you're saying. The only thing I'm saying is that that what some of the stuff that's happening right now is making me uncomfortably wonder if we're edging towards towards some of this stuff, because we've already pushed further than where I thought we would ever be with especially if the if with this vaccine stuff, if the premise becomes like, okay, you got to get this vaccine or you won't be able to engage in commerce, that may not be the mark of the beast. But as far as like the narrative, that whole type of narrative, it's getting close to.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's gonna be a thing. Honestly, I mean, I'm actually to a degree, I'm fine with it because yeah, it has good reasons.
Well, of course, you'd be fine with it, wouldn't you?
For what? Yeah, I mean, they have good reasons for why that would be the case. It keeps the staff safe. It keeps the people safe. I mean, and it keeps the people on the airplane, the other patrons safe. So I mean, it makes sense on a very just fundamental logic based system. Like why? Like this is why these things would save about the future. It's oh my goodness, no, you can't do that. That's like the mark of the beast, and that's what they're doing. They're drawing these because again, this is what our brains do. They draw connections. They find patterns. That's what our brains are like best at, and a lot of times it's fucking wrong. It's wrong. Like we're just making connections that aren't actually there,
Uh-huh. Sure. Well, I agree with a lot of that. I'm not comfortable with the direction that things are going with some of this stuff. Even the religious stuff aside, like I just I mean, you know how much tyranny in the history of tyranny, how much tyranny is actually done in the name of something good. Like it's quite often. So I'm much more skeptical than your average person. Well, I don't know if I'm skeptical than the average person, but I would say I feel like I understand better than a lot of people that some of these authoritarian measures when they come in the name of something good, even if there is some initial good, like it's it almost always leads down a bad road, uh, and that's not a road I would like to go down.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, hey, Utah Outcast is back. All right. Yeah, you took a minute, but you're here. That's all right. That's all right. We're gonna be going for a bit, I think. How you feeling, buddy? You gonna
Yeah,
be
I'm
hanging
good.
out for a bit? Okay, cool.
Sure.
All right. And you can bring the phone into the bathroom. It's okay. 'Cause I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
that's
have to
what.
at some point they're gonna have to look at just the wall because I'm gonna have to go pee.
Uh,
But
yeah. I
sorry,
figure with
y'all.
just if I'm just on audio, not video, I can get away with kind of sneaking.
I wish you could pull up the if you had like another computer somewhere, pull up so you can see the comments because that's helpful, so we can
Oh
both
yeah.
see it. If you have it, if you don't, it's totally cool, like no problem.
Yeah, and
But it's just
we'll figure out next time. We'll
okay,
we'll figure do
fair
that.
enough, fair enough. I'll try to just read them out loud as like I'm not gonna read those guys because he's just talking about having the shits. It's not really, and that's why he's like,
Yeah,
but.
sounds like.
but but back to what we were saying. Yeah, and I can see that to a degree because here's the thing: people are crafty, and people with power are especially crafty, and they're good at using things to convince people of things because that's sort of their whole bag, is
Mhm.
convincing people to do what they want them to do, and that's a whole kind of basis of manipulation is don't tell them what they have to do, right? Don't tell them that you want them to do this thing. Get them to realize that they want to do the thing that you want them to do. That's the basis for manipulation, right?
Mhm.
So I can
Yeah.
see where you're coming from in that regard, but it becomes really difficult to differentiate that from like times where you actually need people to do a thing for their own protection, you know what I mean? And so it's like, and we're so cynical a lot of times just as people, because I think, especially in America, we're just so used to being taken advantage of. We're just that's our whole again, that's like our whole bag in America. Like we are a fucking nation of snake oil salesmen. That is like, and we promote it and we do it. And that's like the thing. If you can make money doing it, then you're doing what's right. Whether or not it helps anybody or whether or not it's worth anything doesn't fucking matter. If you can get people to spend the money on it, you're doing the right thing, and so I get where you're coming from on that. And I think that's almost why we have so many conspiracy theorists and stuff in this country, is because we're so used to being taken advantage of. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Here's kind of a question that I'd be curious your thoughts on, because I talk to a lot of atheists, and atheists seem to pride themselves oftentimes, or at least it's kind of sort of their mantra or whatever, to be kind of skeptics, right? I mean, that's
I
kind of the atheist
try.
mantra. A skeptic, right? Like, so
Yeah,
it's like,
I try.
why, how come I come across so many atheists that don't seem to have a healthy skepticism of giving people more power, like governmental power in particular, which is like the most dangerous kind of power you can give somebody, right? Like, I feel like there's not enough healthy skepticism of giving people power, and power. We all know the adage, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we all hear that, and it rings true. Like we hear that, and it hits us in the heart. Like, oh yeah, I hear that. That's true. We all know that there's truth to that, and we all know how things can go bad, giving people more power. So it's like, I don't know. You got any
Yeah,
thoughts on
no,
that?
I get that, because it seems like because I always heard, that I remember my definition used to be of like socialism and stuff was, well, the government controls everything, and that's, but that's not what socialism is. That's a terrible definition. If you use that as a definition, then you're not defining what everybody else recognizes as the concept that you are trying to say. So it fucks you up, but that I see where you're coming from as far as that goes. Um, and I think we are, but I think we're more recognizing it as the people that are pulling the strings of the power. And a lot of times that's huge corporate people like the Jeff Bezos, I would say is somebody who has too much power and has clearly corrupted him, and corrupted the whole thing, what it is. I mean, it's helpful. I mean, I buy stuff from Amazon, don't get me wrong, but it's and if people are pissing and shitting in people's fucking yards because they don't have time, to ever use the bathroom, that's kind of a fucking problem. And that's what I would use as an example of like power being, fucked up because hey, we can just get a bunch of desperate people, and if they need the money bad enough, they're gonna shit in somebody's yard because they got to make those deliveries on time. You know what I mean?
Well, um, yeah, I have no idea how much any of that is occurring within the Amazon corporation. Probably not as much as maybe you think. I'm not saying it's never happened. I mean, I don't know, but I mean that's one type of power, right? Like corporate power. And I think one thing conservatives are starting to realize more and more is that big giving anyone large amounts of power, whether it's government power or corporate power, is generally not that great of a thing. Like the more we kind of break up power. I mean, that's part of what's great about kind of the original ideas of this country is that it's based upon the idea of breaking up power, right? It's not like it's very decentralized power, right?
Right.
So it's like I often see. I feel like one thing maybe I wish we could come together more on is the idea, both on the left and right, of breaking up power. So like the left argues more about breaking up power of like big corporations, but now the right is starting to see that argument a little more with some of the big tech stuff, right? The way it's affecting us, right?
Yeah, which
So
is funny. Yeah.
so as it's affecting us more, we're beginning to actually see the legitimacy of that particular argument. And obviously there's a legitimacy to the argument of breaking up governmental power. In fact, that's like I said, that's the ultimate kind of power. That's the kind of power that comes at your door with guns, with the ultimate authority behind it. Right? So it's like that's the kind of even though we need to be worrisome of corporate power, we need to be extra worrisome of government power for that particular reason.
Right.
And like I said, I wish we could all kind of start to understand that a little more.
Yeah, let me read the comment here. I believe it's X. I'm not totally sure, but I believe he runs the name Utilecast. So he said if you take the money out of it, all you have left is service to the people.
If you take the money out of what?
Like if you take the money out of government, then all you have left is just the services to the people. Like if they're not taking bribes, like I feel like that's kind of
I
where
don't.
the
I don't
direction
agree
he's
with that
going.
because you still have the element of power. Like you could take. I think whoever. You're reading one of the comments, right?
Yeah, that was a comment.
Okay, so I think what this person is discounting is the element of power and how human beings crave money, but they also crave power over people. There are lots of bad people. I don't even necessarily want to paint it in like good or bad, though. I mean, I consider those types of people. There are such a thing as tyrannical people who crave power over people, and even if you don't like even if you think the word tyrannical is a little too kind of hot or whatever, like it's too suggestive or whatever, let's just go with the premise that there are people who want power over society, over whatever, like right. So you can take all the money out of it. That doesn't discount the fact that there are people who are still going to want power over you.
But okay, and fair enough. But their job is to make laws, right? And if they're making laws that not only limit, that would limit themselves, so that wouldn't that because their whole thing is making rules, and if they make rules that limit their own power, would that not? You don't feel like that would sway anybody, or they'd figure out a way
Well,
around that, or
I'm all
how?
for creating rules that limit their own power. The question is, are those rules pragmatically workable, particularly within the framework of our constitutional system and the laws and rights that already kind of presuppose and then the Constitution and all that stuff. So that's something that has to at least be considered. All that.
Yeah, and he's just saying, he's like, don't get me wrong, we've had executive power uh creep for decades. That needs to be limited. So he's agreeing with you on the sense of the power dynamic, I think, struggle there. Is, and that's sort of the point. It's we the people, we actually, we're the ones that they're supposed to be listening to, right, when they make these laws. And so if
Right.
they listen to their constituents and they actually make the laws that limit their own power, wouldn't that kind of throw a wrench in sort of your whole shtick there?
Um, well, the whole conservative utopia is that we would have a government that actually wants to limit their own power. So, but granted, that's hard to do, because once you
It
get
is. It's
once you get
very
once
hard.
you get once you put people in positions of power who crave power, they tend to crave more power. And then we've already given them the positions of power to kind of make to at least in part make some of our rules that control us. I mean, hopefully we're able to maintain enough control in terms of like the people.
Well, I
Or
think,
it's
and I think a lot of, like, okay, because like individuals are multifaceted, right? And so like people can like have certain. I think this is where we get, like, we'll get back into like the right and left politics, is the fact that, somebody like Trump, he kind of figured out how to like say the things that made one side mad and the other side super fucking happy, right? Like, because he was mean to the bad guys, right? He was mean to the people they didn't like, and then they were willing to kind of give him the power, right? That he could then use that to ultimately harm everybody. But they were almost willing to just hand over power to him, you know what I mean, in exchange for him being mean to the people that they don't like, right? And so
well, I'll say this
that's
about
where it gets kind of fucky, right? It's like,
yeah. I'll say this about Trump. I don't know if I agree with everything that Trump did, and I probably don't. I'm not even aware of everything that Trump did, because I'm really more of even though I try to follow like the individual policy stuff. I think of myself more as kind of a big picture person. So
mhm,
like I don't I my brain gets turned into mush as if I read too much like policy wonk stuff, like this bill that said this and you got this bill. I'm not going to go and read like 2,000 pages worth of worth of bills or whatever,
right,
or
right.
regulations. So it's like
It
that's not for me. I don't want to
gets
do that. I don't have
tiring.
the time to do that. I don't find it particularly interesting. But anyways, I think at least my understanding and perception of Trump, based upon everything that I can gather, is that Trump, at least compared to most of the presidents of the recent past, Trump did less to give the executive more authority, and just to give the federal government more authority in general than guys like both Obama and Bush. For example, Bush was a big government Republican, which I don't like. Obama was a big government Democrat, which I really don't like. But and Trump, there are elements about Trump that I really didn't like. I wish he would have been a little more aggressive about wanting to kind of actually cut federal spending. Like that's something that needs to be done. There needs to be some budget balancing going on. And if you're gonna cut taxes, you got to cut spending as well. Yeah, because well, it seems like no matter what we do, no matter who we have in office, like our spending goes up. But just as a general premise, like you can't reasonably like if you cut taxes, like the tax cuts did some good things, but then it's also going to drive up deficits and things of that nature. So I wasn't too pleased with that in terms of his inability to not want to address spending. But other than that, I thought he was at least better than than a lot of the recent presidents in terms of giving the federal government more power. He cut regulations, which whether you like it or not, it definitionally is giving the bureaucracy less control and power. And they're
I mean, it's less rules. I don't know if it's less power. I'd have to see some sort
well,
of connection
control
between the
control is
two.
control is power definitionally, right? You give the bureaucracy
But
more control over people. You're definitionally giving them more power. Now we can agree or disagree on whether or not that control or authority is good or bad, but that doesn't change the nature of the thing.
I mean, but a lot of times regulations were like, for good reason, and to
Well,
roll those.
I didn't say that some of them weren't for a good
No,
reason.
no, I didn't say that. But I'm just saying, like, I feel like regulation equals, uh, them having more power. I don't know. I'd have to. I guess it would depend. It would be like I said, like a case by case basis. We'd have to look at each rule
Well,
that was made or regulation that was rolled back and why. But a lot of the reasoning, I feel like, for why people roll stuff, regulations and stuff back, is fallacious. It's pandering to a certain group of people that are very easy to lie to a lot of times. You know what I mean? I hate that, but I mean it's just the truth. Certain people are just easier to lie to if they have something they feel like they need to be true, and you're saying, hey, we're rolling this back because of this, because otherwise socialism is going to take over the country or whatever, and they get all scared like, oh, okay, yeah, roll back the regulation, I don't need safety measures at work. Yeah, you're right, I can totally work in a factory without any safety measures, or
well,
whatever.
part, part
It's
Well, part of the problem with the debates over regulation is nobody really wants to get into, or even certainly not your average person has the knowledge of all the individual regulations that are being added or cut, and then on top of that, what is the actual effect? Again, not the intent of the regulations. Like it's easy to say this regulation has a good intent. It's another thing to actually deeply analyze the effect of the regulation. Go, okay, did that regulation have did the effect and the intent line up, right? Because those two things aren't always the case. Sometimes
sure,
the effect doesn't line up with the intent, right? So I
right,
think that that's something that needs to be analyzed. I think
that's
that
fair.
there's a lot of regulations that where the effect doesn't meet the intent, and those are regulations that need to be cut, and then I would never advocate for zero regulations, like period. Like so I mean that's not the general conservative argument. You get maybe some anarchists might try and make that argument, but
Yeah, well,
the general
conservative
conservative,
argument.
yeah,
Yeah, because I
yeah.
mean, it's weird. Apparently, like anarchists can be uh socialists and stuff too. I don't understand. I feel like I really need to like look into what an anarchist means these days because I don't know what it means. Like I remember being an anarchist in my youth, and that was mainly so I could just like go break car windows and be like, I'm an anarchist, like fuck everybody. Like, but I feel like today I think it has a very different meaning because listening to Kropotkin, he was like talking about anarchism and stuff and it actually aligning with socialist stuff. But I'm pretty slow, and so I'm trying to keep up with that fucking book, and it's kind of tough. And
Yeah.
so-
My my
so
my
I
basic understanding of anarchism is just no government, which I guess you could,
right, yeah, no
it,
government and
which I guess ideologically you could work from any standpoint. But the reason why I think anarcho-socialism is completely nonsensical. It's not that it's nonsensical in its ideological framework, because anyone can ideologically say that, oh well, see, it's not I would like this kind of socialist model where there's all these like worker co-ops and all this stuff, and the people freely share, and the distribution works this way. Like it's easy to say that I want to do that without government. It's another thing for that to work pragmatically without government. And what most socialists eventually tend to realize is that social model will not work at all. You can't convince enough people to want to participate in that model without government. Certainly not on a big scale. So
Yeah,
also
that's where I get.
the
Yeah,
overwhelming
that's
majority of socialists become big government socialists anyways, because they eventually realize,
well.
oh, well,
You
we kind of
need
have to use government to control people to get them to do what we want them to do.
well, you needed some sort of entity to make the change. I think maybe, but like I feel like maybe they're saying that eventually you don't even need that entity to be there. Like because we're the society and the government and the country that we are, you'd need some sort of government to the entity to come in and be like, here, like you got hey, corporate people, like you got to you CEOs, you're done. You're all done. You don't exist anymore. All the profits that you get are evenly divided up amongst the people, and if the people work harder, they make more money for the company and they get more money, and so CEOs are done. And after we get that entity to do that, then we can do away with that. And I don't know, I'm still working it out. I'm like
Yeah.
I'm still learning about this stuff. Like I said, I'm trying to read through these fucking books, and god damn, I don't know if my because I don't just feel like my brain doesn't work this way. Because it's complicated shit. We're talking about societal stuff and societally being impacted by these decisions and stuff and these changes, and like what would society look like if we made these changes, and you can speculate all you like, but that doesn't mean that it actually be that way. And so I'm kind of just stuck with like, do we need actual evidence to demonstrate that these things would work? And so I'm kind of just at the I don't know, like I am with God, sort of question of, but I like that they value people's lives and people's experiences more than I feel like the other side does. Let me put it that way.
So I think that's the perception I certainly get from from your side of the aisle. I think where the divide comes in is more is that I think the perception is wrong in the sense that
Hold on,
like
let's real quick. Hold on. Okay, and I'm sure there is evidence of socialism working and stuff like that. I'm just saying, me personally, me
well
personally would need to be convinced by evidence. And I see what you're saying. Like there's definitely countries. I mean the most of the Western where like Finland and stuff like that is better, but
it depends. Yeah, I mean, it depends
I
on
do
what you
have a
mean by
union. Yeah.
socialism. That gets into some sticky debates too, because people say the word socialism and sometimes they don't even mean the same thing. I'll critique some conservatives. Sometimes they'll use socialism a little too loosely, and I get what they're doing. Like they're both using it. They're both using it colloquially in the sense that like they basically they're using it to mean like any form of of growth of government is socialism, which isn't necessary. It's like yes
Yeah,
and
that's
no.
that's
Yeah.
what I mean. Like they think big government means socialism, and from what I'm listening to in the books, that doesn't seem to necessarily be the case at all. So that's why I think the anarchy slash socialism thing can make sense. I'm just again like I'm
Well,
not educated enough to be able to
I
talk
think
about this
it
stuff.
only it only make well I think it only makes sense on a really small scale, and so it's maybe workable on a really small scale, and on a big scale I don't think it's workable at all. Like I think that's just some utopian hippy dippy bullshit, like to be
Yeah.
honest. Like
So like he was
it's
real quick. Here's what he was saying. He was like, let me go back a little bit. We do have evidence that socialism is a better system. He's replying to me, saying that I don't necessarily have. And then he said you only need to look at the happiest nations on earth, which again, like I would say, like is Finland and other places in that area. Um, and then he asked if I had a union. I nodded yes. We do. I do have a union. He said that's socialism. It has helps you. We have 8-hour workday and 5-hour or 5-day work weeks, no child labor, and paid days off for a certain. Which I have all those things. And he said socialism. And just because he can't imagine it doesn't mean it doesn't work. That was the last one there. So hey, tell you
Uh,
what, I'm gonna let you respond to that, and then maybe you can recap it when I get back. But go ahead and respond to the chat, and I will be right back. Sorry,
Gosh, I,
I know it's lame.
I was flipping through my phone to find something, and I only caught like a third of that.
Oh, okay. One more time, real quick. Okay, let me just do the important ones. So we have an 8-hour work day, a 5-day work week, and no child labor and paid days off. That's socialism. Just because you can't imagine it doesn't, just because you can't imagine it doesn't mean it doesn't work. You know, uh, it's like the innovative kind of mind, I think. And if anybody gets mad that I'm going to the bathroom, quit watching Twitch then, because everybody does this on Twitch all the time.
Okay, so I think part of this is whether or not we agree on the definition of socialism, and I'm not exactly sure how y'all would define socialism, and I can't currently see any of the comments, but there may be kind of some division on that. So it's like the way I would personally define socialism would be kind of the traditional definition of socialism, right? Which I think most people understand, which is basically that this kind of like worker co-op ideas that basically, whether or not it's government centralized or not, I think is kind of beside the point. Though I think the only way it's workable on a large scale is government, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. So yes, obviously socialism, I think, is this idea that that things are kind of run by this kind of collective effort, that like there's no owner of the company, or even if there is an owner, like maybe that like there's and some kind of equal participation in workplace decisions on all levels, and in some sense there's some kind of like equal distribution. I mean that's at least kind of the general basic definition of socialism. So I'm not sure, why you would necessarily say that the concept of unions or socialism, or that having this government program or that government program necessarily is socialism, because I criticize conservatives all the time for just saying that we're adding this government program. Well, that's definitely necessarily socialism. And that's not necessarily the case, but he's back. How'd everything come out? How's the flow?
Sorry, man. I don't mean to lose your flow. I don't mean to throw off your groove.
No, but yeah, we can get into some of the union stuff. Also, you made some comments about like some of the the happy countries or whatever. I have a couple comments on that. So the first one is this whole idea of this country is happier than another country is based upon self-reporting, and it's not necessarily, most of the time, it's not based upon a very scientific way of kind of analyzing happiness in terms of like, this is happy and this isn't happy, which happiness to begin with it's hard to quantify scientifically. So I would be careful in terms of like making that kind of a dartboard, like people who think that's like a shot in the heart too. I've heard, I don't have the statistics pulled up. I have a couple related statistics I did have on my phone that I'm going to pull up. Is that so? Some of these, if you actually follow the individuals from some of these countries as they move to other countries, that they often report higher degrees of happiness as they move around to other countries as well. So, for example, if you interview a Danish person that is originally from there, and I think this applies to some of those other countries too, like Switzerland and Sweden, that these people often, even the ones that live in the United States and have lived here for a while, that they report higher degrees of happiness living here as well, compared to the average American. So there's to this as well, that maybe it's just possible that it's not about the country or the environment quite as much. It may be possible that that Swedes and Danes, that there may be some genetic component that we're not yet able to identify, that makes them naturally happier people, right? Because one thing we know about happiness is that we do know there's a high genetic component about it, because we can look at stuff like depression. And you can look at two people from the same family who grew up in great home. One's super depressed, and one's not, and they don't live that different of lives. So and it usually comes down to a genetic component. So that's something to consider. Before if we're going to get into like maybe some of the union stuff.
Yeah,
Just one
let's
more.
we can move on to that. And like I said, like I'm good for a good bit here. So like probably the next 40 minutes or so, at least till about 2 o'clock my time. And then I'm probably gonna start to fade and my
Yeah.
eyes are gonna get heavy.
So here's kind of maybe a certain place to start. This doesn't necessarily relate to union specifically, but this relates to the whole Nordic stuff. Danish American living standards are 50% higher than those living back in their native country. Sweden, it's 53% higher. Finland, it's 59% higher. So yeah, again, even when these people move to places like the United States, they move to America. They still end up having statistically higher living standards. So again, maybe there's something in their work ethic that makes them, again, there's a lot of things to consider. I'm not forming absolute conclusions about these things. I'm not saying it's necessarily genetics. I'm not saying it's something in the way that they're taught. But I am saying that there are some interesting statistics to analyze and consider when looking into this topic. So
Yeah, I mean, and it could be that they're coming to the country that has Hollywood, you know, and that's pretty cool, right? we got cool
sure.
stuff here. Don't get me wrong, we have fucking
Sure.
amazing,
So
cool
I would
ass
bet.
shit.
I would bet if I was betting money, I would bet rates of depression in Hollywood are higher than the average town in America. I don't know that as a fact, but if I was going to bet on it,
Right. Well, I mean, we're all kind of the thing about America that's weird, with this American exceptionalism kind of thing is like everybody's told that they themselves are somebody. You just got to figure it out, man. You're a fucking rock star. You're a movie star. You're a scientist. You're your house. Like you're the doctor that figures shit out that nobody else can figure out. Like you are the guy. It's like you are the main one. And that's like our country because it's like so media based and so like this fucking built up like movie world that we're all enamored with, and so we all believe these things. We all believe that, yeah, I can be the fucking best. Yeah, man, I can do it. You're the best around. I mean, like we got every exactly right. And so I just feel like we're enamored with this, and so like the rest of the world's looking at us, and their perception of us is almost like, yeah, and like it's made up of everybody, all of the different cultures, all of the different things. And that's why a lot of times we're like looking for representation in different places because we want that guy to feel like he's the best, like he could be the best, like, and he's not being represented on the screen. So, hey, we need to make a movie where that dude is being represented and they're the best or whatever. They're the star of their fucking movie. That's just, I don't know. I feel like that could definitely play a major part in people coming here and be like, all right, no, I'm happy. I'm rearing to go, man. Opportunity, bro. But the reality is in pure numbers, is most of our country is fucking poor and suffering and almost is being beat over the head with, hey, you can be something if you just try. And at the same time going, yeah, but that's fucking impossible because of the situation I'm in. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's tough.
So you just made a claim that I'll be curious how you actually back up, which is most of this country is poor. Like, how do you defend that statement?
Well, I mean, there's a large portion of poverty in this country for sure. Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
And you're defining poverty as what?
well, I mean, making less than what? I mean, we can go with the $15 minimum wage. I mean, if that would be bad, like what? I mean, I'm uh let's see, like
So there
so
is.
poorer than me. I'm super lucky though with everything that's happened with me. I actually make quite like that's very small amount of money uh compared to the way I'm living. But I got very lucky in a lot of different regards. A lot of different regards. But so I don't know. I don't know how you would define poverty. I would say I feel like it was what is it, like anything less than 50,000, right? Isn't that the
No, not even close.
yeah?
The poverty line, and this is how it's officially defined, and it's defined differently per whether you're an individual or as it goes up, obviously. But for a single individual, it's I believe it's somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 annually a year. If you make less than that, that is the officially defined poverty
But it
line by whoever keeps.
but that the poverty line hasn't been moved since like the 80s. And we've had inflation since then. That's sort of the problem because we're still basing a lot of our uh compensation and stuff to these people based off of a poverty line that's from the 80s that
Well,
hasn't
do
moved
you do you
since
know?
then.
I'm asking because I don't
Because that's
actually
just the
know.
basis of like how you get help, right? Like that's the poverty line that you're talking about is the government poverty line saying, hey, anybody that makes less than this, they need help. And those are basically the only people getting help, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the only people needing help, right?
Um, yeah, I suppose. But if you if you were to define the poverty line by
So
people making less.
10.5% is the hold on, wait, but what is that in relation to? X. What are you referencing when you say 10.5%? Is that the amount of people within the country? Like 10.5% of the country is below poverty level? Is that the people night? Hold on. Jesus, I'm having trouble. My dyslexia is going crazy right now. All right, three people, 19,985. Four people, 25,701. Five people, 30 uh uh, uh 30,000 for uh 40 45 9. That's 36, that's out of wait, it's 36 million of people that fall into those numbers. I just posted. I'm so confused. Maybe I drank too much before the people in the people in a household, yearly income. Got it. Okay. Did you get that?
What was
That's the
that?
poverty levels. Okay, so if there's three people in a household, then 19,000, anything under 19,985 would be poverty level. Anything with four people in a household is 25,701. Five people would be uh 30,445 9. Those are the poverty level numbers
Okay. Hold
for
on,
the
just saying up.
amounts of people in a household. And the
Okay.
and honestly the the minimum wage rate does not reflect that, and that's sort of the problem, right?
Yeah. So, all right, I want to provide a little bit of perspective here. So I'm not
Hmm.
sure how much you've dug into some of these numbers, and I'd like to lead this a little bit into some of the union stuff because the reason why I actually did some of this, and this is all independent research that I've done.
Mhm.
But the reason why I even have these numbers is because I did a debate related to some of this stuff. So, are you aware that there's not a single country in the entire world where the median household income is higher than $55,000? That is that's the
Hmm.
highest that's the highest median household income, and we can go through some of these numbers, but I'd like to go through them related to some of the union stuff, because I kind of created my own kind of falsifiable, not necessarily experiment. That's not the word. I guess research would be probably the best word. So I kind of did my some research related to some of the stuff that I wanted to test whether or not I was actually correct, and I wanted to do this independently myself. I didn't want to go to like some official right wing or left wing website or whatever that I know is gonna maybe feed me what I want to hear or what I don't want to hear.
Yeah.
But before I get into some of that, like, I just want to know your general thoughts on unions, kind of why you like them, why you support them, and some reasons. I may even agree with some of the reasons, but anyways, I just want to hear some stuff from you, and then I'll do
Absolutely.
my.
Yeah, no problem. That sounds good. I like unions generally because I feel like they value the employee over the employer, or at least give the employee some line of defense or some sort of buffer between the two that values them as much as the employer. And yeah, I think that it's very helpful. I think to a lot of companies, as far as like wage wage increases and stuff like that over time, like what this person is worth. And they make it so that they can't be fully exploited to the point of being harmed by their employer, so they have some line of de- defense. Like they don't have to go hire an outside lawyer to come in if they have a union. I've had representation myself where people were claiming that I was doing things that I was not doing, but because this employer was angry at me and was trying to use their power to harm me, I had representatives within the union that were like, "Prove it." And it forced them to kind of have to abide by union regulation and union uh you know um negotiation in that sense, right? Because they had to then negotiate and be able to demonstrate that their claims were true, and at the end of the day they weren't. But if that union wasn't there, I'd have been fucked. I'd have lost my job. They would have been able to just throw me out on the street just because this dude thought something that was wrong, or not even thought the thing. He was trying to do something that was incorrect, that was immoral, and use his power to harm me because of something that he was unhappy with about me. And the union kind of made it so that that wasn't they weren't capable of actually doing that.
Yeah. So first off, I wouldn't say that. I would never say that unions are all bad. That sometimes even good. Sometimes are even good for for wages and workers and all that stuff. Historically, you can tie unions to certain things that I think we all like. Uh, Certain, like 40-hour work week and things like that.
Hmm.
So like unions aren't all bad. I don't want to paint them like that, but I think well, a couple things, like before I just kind of get into some of these numbers here. I just want to maybe just give some general thoughts about unions. So I think there are certain kinds of unions that are better or worse than others. I think the teachers' unions I'm not particularly fond of, because and the police unions as well. Actually, maybe there may even be some crossover agreement on the police unions, because the police unions kind of help protect some of the bad cops, right? Like just like teachers unions that can protect some bad teachers, which sometimes can often get in the way of having better educational standards for our kids and students. So I think there are definitely problems that exist in the unions. There are some structural problems, and I really have a problem with public sector unions entirely. Like I think there is some debatable good or in terms of private sector unions. But I think public sector unions are just, I mean, they're criminal for kind of lack of a better word. But I don't want to go too much down that rabbit trail. I want to kind of talk about some of these numbers that I found in my research about this. So, like, if I were to ask you, and again, I'm asking you this, knowing that that I'm baiting you.
Fair
I'm
enough.
just gonna
No,
say,
you can bait
I'm
me.
just gonna
Bait me.
say
Let's do
that, going into
it. That's
so
fine.
like would you say that you believe that there's a direct relation between unions or unionization rates and higher wages? Like, if I were just to ask you that question, just and off the top, like, would you say that's probably true?
I mean, you're asking sort of the wrong person for this, because I've worked for 16 years at a public sector under a union, and we did not get a whole lot of wage increases. That wasn't necessarily what they were fighting for. So it was better conditions and things like that. So I would say sometimes, but not. I wouldn't say there's a direct correlation. That's one of the things that they do, but it's one of the things that they do more poorly than anything else. It seems, if that's fair. And that's an
Yeah.
anecdotal, like, right, like, I'm basing this off of what I understand, because I went about, I want to say, like, 7 years without getting any raise, having a union, right? I did get other things, right? I got days off that I would have otherwise had to work. I got a bunch of working conditions that were, and it was this negotiation between the union and the government and whatnot, and the entity that I was working for. So I wouldn't say there's a direct correlation. No, I wouldn't agree with that. No,
Okay.
but
Fair enough. But yeah,
I see
it's
why people
interesting.
think that, though, because they're
Yeah.
negotiating on their behalf, but that's not the outcomes that come from it most of the time. All right, like,
Sure.
I don't even know if it's most of the time. I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
for
And
my in
that's
my
yeah.
case, it wasn't. That wasn't the
Yeah.
core
And
basis of what they
that's
did.
exactly what I discovered. There's absolutely no correlation at all between unionization rates and higher wages. And I know that shocks a lot of people on the left, maybe not yourself, but it is a common thing that I hear, is that yeah, like, unions are good for workers, and they boost wages. Right, that's a common claim. It's like, more
If
weight.
if they can negotiate it right, like with the higher ups and stuff, but the union can only do so much. So yeah,
Yeah, so like
especially
so
if
here,
they're being gutted by
here's
the government.
what I did, and I did this. It took me some time, and I did this completely independently, and went to official sources.
Hmm.
Uh, so so I wanted to find out, because I've been hearing this a lot. So I wanted to kind of find out for myself whether that narrative was more true, or more what I was hearing from the conservative end was true, which was no, that's not the case at all. Um, so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna try and figure out a way to determine this, like, on my own. So here's what I did. First off, I went and I looked up the top 20 wealthiest countries, there's numerous metrics you can go off. The main one I was going off of was the median household income. I think that's probably the best one to go off of.
Sure.
And there's also there's numerous sources that you can go to kind of find these lists of countries too. So I think I have that written down somewhere. somewhere in here. But then I cross checked it with other sources too. And so while some of the countries were slightly inverted from one list to the other, all the lists were more or less very similar. Like they generally kind of stacked up the same. That's the first thing I did. I wanted to find that out. And
Okay.
then I went to each one of those countries individually, and I looked up their unionization rates because I wanted to say, okay, so it's like if there's a correlation there, then the richer countries probably should have higher unionization rates, and the poorer countries should have lower unionization rates as a general trend, right? So I'll hopefully this isn't too much quick information, but
No, you're
I'm
good.
gonna name yeah. So I'm gonna try and list off the top. I'm gonna go with the list off the kind of the top 15 wealthiest countries from number 1 to number 15, and then I'm gonna tell you what the unionization rates are for each one, right?
Okay.
So the number 1 is Luxembourg, which is 40% unionization rate.
Okay.
And then we have Norway, which is 52% unionization rate, and then Sweden, which is 71% unionization rate. So we got some of these Nordic countries represented. And then it gets kind of interesting, right? So then you got number four, Australia, which is only 14% unionization rate, so very low unionization rate. Then the Denmark, which is 67%, which is again going back up more on the higher. Then you have the United States. So United States makes, depending on the list you look at, around the top 5 or so. The United States is only around 10% unionization rates. One of the lowest unionization rates you'll find, and yet we're in the top 5 most richest countries in the entire world.
Right.
And like I said, then it gets kind of interesting from there. It kind of bounces back and forth. Canada, 28%. South Korea, which is 11%, similar to the United States. Kuwait, which is way down, 5%. And then it's interesting. New Zealand, which their overall unionization rate is actually 86%, pretty high. Hong Kong, 14% low. Austria, kind of in the middle, 26. Japan, in the middle, 45. Finland's 59, which is kind of back fairly high. And then I also looked at the bottom of the list too. So then I looked at like the top 15 countries with like I looked at, sorry, not to confuse everybody. I wanted to look at independently the top 15 countries with the highest unionization rates, and then look at where they fit on the list, right? So on that list we have Iceland, Cuba, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Belgium, and then it gets like a lot of poor countries. So Malta, Kazakhstan, Cyprus, Ukraine, Egypt, Sierra Leone. And even China's on this list, but China isn't even as rich as I thought they were in terms of median household income. They're not that high on the list actually. But anyways, so that's kind of what I discovered in my own independent research. So on this list of the highest unions, some of the highest unionization rates. The countries with the highest unionization rates, some of those are like way down the list, are very poor. And then meanwhile, we got some countries on the list of the that are very rich in the top 5, that have top 5 or top 10 with very low unionization rates, like around between 5 and 10%. Wow. So like there's absolutely no statistical correlation at all between.
I mean, we'd have to see, and I see where you're coming at, like the angle that you're coming at it from, and I think that's an excellent start to looking at this stuff. However, I would, for me, I would really like to know, because I mean, you can have a poorer country, but if there's a huge income, uh, income inequality gap, even in a poorer country, right? Even say they don't have they don't have as much money overall. If there's a huge gap between between the rich people that are there and the poor people that are there, then I feel like you'd have the more unions and stuff, right? And it would be something that they would push for and everything and have. So I don't know. I feel like that we need to implement some other like what you did is cool and everything, and it's fascinating, really. But I feel like there's some other data that we need to implement into our uh, what we're looking at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, this
Because
gives you the
it's less about the overall just to sum up, it's less about the overall money that the country has and more about the amount of money that some people have and then everybody else doesn't. And that is the crux sort of
well,
like
it doesn't
why
seem like
unions would
there's
be
any, and
necessary.
I've done a little bit of this, but I don't have this info off the top. But it doesn't seem that there's any direct relation between economic inequality and lower rates of wealth. I mean, it seems like there's actually even usually a direct correlation between there being vast amounts of inequality and higher rates of higher annual household incomes. Because
Because here's the
I
thing
mean,
too, like if you have more if you have certain things like covered, right? So like if you have like a like good health care, right, and food and housing and things like that are guaranteed by your government, you're gonna you know what I mean, you're not gonna need as much, you're not gonna need that as much, right?
well, I guess that's a separate issue. I knew
I mean, it's a
I
separate
knew
issue, but it can affect what we're talking about, right?
sure, and I have no idea if these numbers are related. Have, what the tax rates are. I don't know if this includes like tax rates or not. Like when it says the annual household income for someone in Luxembourg or whatever is $52,000. I have no idea if that means $52,000 before taxes or after taxes. So I mean
Yeah, that would be
that would at
helpful to
least
know, right? That's a
yeah,
good
I mean,
piece
that
of
would at least be
information
interesting.
there.
But that has nothing to do with unions. Like that has nothing
Right,
to do with you. With the specific of a
right.
claim that the unions or higher union participation is correlated with higher wages, right? So
Right.
that we can pretty much debunk. I think
Sure, but I
now
mean,
with
the whole purpose of a union kind of different is different from country to country, given their socioeconomic state, like and income inequality, and whether or not healthcare and all, and food and things like that are rights of the people. That does factor in big time. You know what I mean? Like that kind of can throw out, that can kind of mess up our whole equation here, or a whole
um,
quantification of like how we're trying to figure this out. Because those
yeah.
those little bits of information can vastly change the whole point of what we're saying, you know because we're kind of taking it again, we're zooming out and we're just looking at the money based on these specific factors. And if we and that's why the one thing that I like about being on the left, honestly, is that we're trying to find all of the information. We're trying to look at all these different things that most people would just like not even think about. You know what I mean? And so it kind of gets it can change your perspective, given that you understand the situations of a lot of these people that certain sides are trying to tell you not to care about. And I think like, here's why you should not give a shit about these people. And maybe I'm wrong. You can tell.
I've never seen that piece.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, they.
I
I
think
mean,
you're straw manning a little bit there.
maybe I am. Maybe I am. And I'm not trying to, but I'm just saying as a general statement. I see the right telling us not to care about certain people's feelings, and to me, again, that violates the universal imperative, because then basically you're setting a precedent that says that I don't have to care about your feelings. And so when they're doing that, and saying, "Hey, gay people are doing this or whatever," and it's terrible or whatever, and the other side is going, "Yeah, but these things are happening to gay people, and that's terrible." it kind of makes me think that this side is saying, hey, you shouldn't care about how gay people think because they're actually a problem. You know what I
Well,
mean?
the way the right generally thinks, being somebody who's like super engaged into it and follows, all the major figures that I can think of, is that we most of the time, anyways, try to take the whole take these kind of racial sexual identity factors out of the equation as much as possible, and so it's like we don't this whole like the whole premise that you're kind of sort of presenting is it like, oh, it's like you shouldn't you know support gay people doing whatever, and it's like what we're trying to get at is trying to get away from this whole viewing people as gay people or straight people or black people or white people, and just kind of seeing everyone as individuals and seeing us all, and in the big picture seeing us all as kind of this humanity and the human race and equal under
It's the I
in
don't
the
see
eyes.
color argument, like basically, right?
Well, it's not the I don't see. Well, I mean, that's the colloquial way
Well,
of
yeah, I'm just
phrasing it.
saying general. Like I don't see the end. I don't see the demographic. I just see the individual kind of thing. Is that
Well,
fair?
well, that is the ideological and philosophical framework that we try to work off of. Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like, but doing that right there by saying I'm not going to put you in this group. I'm just going to see you as people in general. And we can say that, I don't see this person as I just see this person as just an individual, just like I see every other individual. But I feel like that would be being dishonest because you do see those differences. We all
Well,
do.
well,
And
well.
that's okay.
You're being overly pedantic by saying we don't see. Of course, we see them and know that they're there. And it's not about lying to oneself and saying these things don't exist. It's about the framework in which we approach the topic and the issues ideologically and philosophically.
Sure. Yeah. And but that's the thing is like those things, like knowing that this person is of a particular demographic. Some people really, and I'm not saying this is you, I'm just saying, but some people use that as an excuse to not care about their individual things that they care about that we might not understand, right? And so to us, that the people that don't understand how they're experiencing the world go, I don't care because I don't care about those differences, and therefore those feelings that you're having are invalid. And that's,
Well,
you see what I mean?
yeah.
And that
Well,
that gives permission to everybody else to treat you that same way.
well. With like just to comment on the phrase like your feelings are invalid, like sometimes your people's feelings are valid, meaning that they align with reality, and sometimes they're invalid, meaning that they don't correctly align with reality, so I think that's at least important
I
thing
would
to
agree with
distinguish.
that. Yeah, some
Yeah, yeah.
people's feelings are there are feelings that people have that are invalid. I will agree with that. If people are talking about the fetuses that they care about so much, and things like or whatever, that the coalition of fetuses that all convinced them, like because their constituents apparently are fetuses, and they're telling them, they're holding signs say, "I deserve to be able to live," or whatever. That that's not real. None of that's real. It's made up. Whatever. I would agree with you in that front. Like there are certain feeling in people that believe in their religion and say that I think that everybody should follow my religion and stuff. Those are feelings that are invalid, right? I would agree. That's why we have to take it sort of by a case by case basis, right? And that's why this can get kind of complicated because we're like, well, hey, if you're allowed to do that, then I'm allowed to say that transgender folks are not valid, right? But it's like it's not necessarily that easy. You know what I mean? Like it's not necessarily that these people because you can say that those people are invalid, then these people are also invalid. You know what I mean? Like it's we need actual reasoning behind it.
Yeah, well, it's not that there aren't eccentricities, or that there aren't maybe some subtle differences between, people of a certain race or sexual proclivity, or whatever. There are maybe some generalizations that can be made about different groups of people. Well, I think what the right at least cautions against is creating a society where we segment too much into these groups, and we in perpetuity keep fractioning off into these different factions and different groups, and especially as it relates to things that are particularly arbitrary. Things like race is like the most arbitrary identifying factor of a human being that I could probably think of. Maybe you have a better example, but to me, I feel like that it's the most meaningless thing. And the more we try and separate each other by racial lines, to me that's one of the worst things like we could do. And I think you know I try too much not to make value judgments, but I am going to, in the sense, like I think that I think people who do that are being very foolish, because they don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand that they're actually creating more racism, even though their intent is to create less racism. I think they're creating more division, and they're pointing out these things, and they're dividing us more. Therefore, that's creating more racism and not less racism. And if they don't, people who don't understand that, I think are foolish.
But I mean, there's a lot of, and I see where you're going with that, and I feel like there's a lot of nuance there, and it's basically we're each individually offended and hurt. We're hurt. People are hurt by different things, right? Different things might be hurtful to different people, right? Like if I said like the R word, I don't use the word, but if I use the R word around someone that is has had mental difficulty and stuff like that, or mental uh what I mean, like they're
Retarded.
slow and stuff like, yeah. What's the I feel like there's a word for it, but I'm just stifled on it. But if we use that around those folks, they're gonna be hurt by that, and it's painful, and we act like words don't mean anything. They do though. They are harmful to certain people, right? And so those particular words and phrasing around how we talk about somebody that we're just mad at or whatever, and we use that kind of language, that's harmful to that group of people, right? And it's specific,
Well,
right? Because it's about certain things. So a black person might have a whole nother uh, grouping of things that are harmful to them. You know what I mean? Like I know like one thing in particular is white people liking to touch black women's hair and black people's hair, I guess specifically. Is that that's hard. That the fact, and to us was like, yeah, you can touch my hair. I don't even care if you touch my hair. It's not a big deal. But we're not being othered while it's happening, and we're not, you know what I mean? So it's like a different
well,
phenomenon
okay.
for them, and it
I'm
might
not.
seem arbitrary to us because we're just like,
Well,
I wouldn't care if somebody was like, oh, cool, like weird, you got hair that's like this, whatever. But to that group of people, that is very specific. That's
Well,
what
I
I'm
would
saying.
I would argue it. I would say, and this may be hard to say that we could objectively define what is arbitrary, but I would at least try to put the idea of what is or isn't arbitrary into some sort of more objective category. I would objectively say that touching somebody's hair is not harmful to them. It may offend them. They may not like it, but objectively it doesn't harm them. I mean, what definition are we using of harm? Like, and it would be ridiculous to say, well, touching your hair harms you, but touching this other person's hair doesn't harm them. That you haven't established any sort of objective standard for harm. So in that sense, I reject the premise that it's somehow harmful to somebody to touch their hair or whatever.
Well, right, okay. Let me put it this way, because history is important, right? And we know that in the past, this group of people has been not really treated the best and not really seen as human, really. I mean, they were seen as three-fifths of a human. So, and then going, oh man, what a freak. And let's get them in front of, we're in front of my entire family. Hey, is it okay? Let me just touch your hair. You freak. You don't see the harm in that?
Well, if you call them a freak, that's
Well,
one thing.
sure, but that's
If
what
you're
that's
just
going through
doing it
their
because,
head, though. I mean, I'm just
well,
like I'm saying, like they're
well,
treating me like I'm a
now
freak,
you're trying to mind read like
or I'm
everyone
different. I'm
who
so
touches
different.
somebody else's hair.
Yeah,
Do
I'm
what?
so different that it's so interesting to this group of people who have been subjected, that have been oppressed by. That it's so interesting that they touch my hair in front of people. Like, I mean, you don't see the harm in that. That they could mentally be like, "This is horrible." Like that in that moment, be like, "Oh my god, I wish I wasn't here."
I
I
wouldn't.
mean, I
I,
don't know how to
I'm
say it
well.
otherwise.
I don't. I personally am not one to want to touch anybody's hair, so I don't relate to the premise. But do I think it's harmful? No, it's not harmful. I think, and again, I'm going to be the stodgy conservative here for a moment. Like, there you go. And I'm gonna say that that if you think that somebody touching your hair is objectively harming you, then you need to develop some perspective and some grit, and like, stop being such a fucking pussy. Like, nobody's harming you by touching your hair. Like, I mean, let's be real here. You may not like it, it may offend you, and I think you should tell, if someone is doing it and you don't like that they're doing it, just tell them, hey, I don't like it. And they can either
But
react,
then
oh, okay, I'm
everybody in the
sorry.
room goes, "Hey, hey, man, quit being such a pussy. I'm just trying to touch your fucking hair."
Well,
Come
yeah,
on,
I'm not.
that's
Yeah,
you don't see that.
but when
Like,
I
put yourself in their shoes, like as the person that is like you know what I mean, the different
well,
one.
two things can be true at the same time, right? That person can be internally be a little bit of a fucking pussy, and also too, it can be not a good idea to touch someone else's hair. And should probably maybe not do that. Like, both of those two things can be true at the same time.
Sure. Yeah, they you're out, that is true. They can be being too sensitive. There are such thing as that, but the what I'm trying to say is that that is a form of something that specifically, like, they have explained, like, a lot is not, hey, that's something we don't like as a people, within a society that where we're the minority. That's something we really don't like, you know and it's kind of just
Well,
widely known at this
most
point.
people don't like strangers touching their hair,
Most
like
people
people that they
don't,
don't know.
right?
Yeah, so just
Yeah.
don't touch other people. It's probably just not a good idea to touch other people's hair in general, especially if you're not intimately involved
Or
with them.
even
Don't touch it.
asking in front of a crowd of people that are, white or whatever. You know what I mean? Maybe don't do that. Maybe don't put them in that position to have to go, do I have to point out that this is like offensive to like me and everybody that looks like me? Like, do I have to do that? Because then they might get mad and be like, oh, what are you calling me racist? Oh, and then you're putting them in that mental position to have to make that decision in that moment. I
Yeah,
mean,
sure.
you know what
Sure,
I'm
and
saying?
I'm actually criticizing both ends of the spectrum here. I'm criticizing the people who are touching the hair, and I'm criticizing the people who are getting their hair touched, saying like, okay, like, it's not that big of a deal if someone touches your hair, get over it. Like, but I think both of those are perfectly reasonable critiques to make.
Yeah. I agree, to a degree. I would say, the fact that I have less ability to actually empathize with a particular group makes it, the fact that I understand how white people feel, because I'm a white person, and so I know how that feels or whatever. And so, like, but that,
Do all white people think alike?
no, no, not necessarily, but
I know. I'm just
I
giving you
for the
shit.
longest for the longest time, I remember saying, like, I wouldn't care if somebody was like, "Oh, hey, your hair is like straight and brown or whatever," like, and hey, let me touch that. Okay, no problem. But we're in a culture where there's been a group that has been oppressed for a long time. We're finally starting to kind of come out of that. I'm talking from a historical perspective over hundreds of years, of course. But we're starting to kind of empathize a bit more with a particular with everybody. We're all the internet connected us, and we're all starting to go, God damn, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that affected it that way. And like we were talking about with when we first got on the call the last time, was like the human element of us talking first, right? And us like, hey, what's up, man? Hey, just give me a sec, I gotta work on some stuff, and just hang with me. What all that humanization that we did before we got into these conversations mattered a lot. You know what I mean? And so the fact
Sure.
that all of society is now interacting with different types of people, and we're getting better at basically explaining, like, hey, this is why this is harmful to me. uh you know Even if it's not like me getting cut or bruised or doing anything actual, like getting beaten, but this hurts me in a way or whatever. This is important to me to not be harmed in this way. And we're starting to go, oh man, I never thought about it like that. You're right. Shit, I guess I'm not gonna say that anymore, because you're my buddy, and I'm not gonna, if I hear somebody else say it, I'm gonna be like, hey, can we not say that thing? Because, like, I got my friend, and that would be harmful to him, even though he's not here. That's just not a behavior I think that you should be saying, because that if that's harmful to them, that could be harmful to other people that feel similar to them. You know what I mean? And I think that's a good thing, right? That we're like being more sensitive to other people, right? I just
Well, I
I
think
don't.
here's the way I perceive our current state of affairs in society. I think we've become less empathetic while simultaneously becoming more sensitive. I think those are slightly different things. So it's like I think people are becoming more sensitive in the sense that they're being offended by more and more things, and I think like people are becoming less empathetic because there's actually probably the internet is probably a big reason for that, because it's like we converse so much with people, we see them just as kind of avatars on a social media page or whatever, as opposed to a living, breathing, walking, talking human being.
Mhm.
So I
Absolutely.
think that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I think
think.
empathy is important, but I think empathy gets overemphasized sometimes, and other things get underemphasized. And I think too, I mean, I think everyone's always empathizing with somebody. And part of the problem with the empathy conversation is it's like, okay, like I get it, like empathy is good. It's like sometimes the left and right are empathizing with different people and different things, and yeah, it's good to see both sides. But too often, yeah, the what I see on the left is like it's like you need to empathize with me, or empathize with this person, and it's like yeah, well, what about empathizing with this other person? Oh, screw them. Like, no, you got to empathize with who I want you to empathize with.
But based
I
on
think that
what? Why would they not empathize with the other person?
Okay, here's an example.
Because
Okay,
if
like
there's
the
someone that, hold on, let me stop you real quick. Let me just put this as a caveat first. Because if they're not, if the person that they're asking me to empathize with is not empathetic to people, a certain group of people, whoever it may be, that's going to lessen the amount that I actually give a shit about their empathy, because of the universal imperative that I was talking about. If
well,
okay, because
well,
if
okay,
you
I
are
under,
being
well, I
that
under,
way, then that gives me more permission to not be that way with you.
well, while I understand your premise, I think oftentimes that viewpoint gets abused and skewed. And so I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about.
Sure, I can.
So,
Yeah.
so I'll use a specific example, so I'm not just throwing out generalities. So take like the Jack Phillips guy, the guy that the Christian bakery owner that was that went all the way to the Supreme Court about all the whether or not he would
Sell
bake
it, sell a cake to the gay
a
people.
wedding cake for gay couples. Now let's put aside either one of our opinions about whether or not he should or shouldn't do that, or whether that's good or bad or whatever. Just specifically center this around kind of the empathy thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
so I think in this situation, I think we have a very clear example of two sides that I think display very little empathy towards the other side. I think, and also, yeah, so I think I'll speak of Jack first, the bakery owner. So I think he may not be empathizing enough with the gay couple that comes in that that wants just wants a wedding cake, whatever. He's not displaying enough empathy towards their perspective. However, and I think this particularly true with his case because I know for a fact that his bakery was specifically targeted as kind of a political target to go after because they knew he specifically wasn't going to do the whole like gay wedding cake thing, right? And so what we have here is a dual kind of inability to empathize because from his perspective. So let's think about it now from his perspective, looking back out. His perspective is that it's not that I don't think it's that he's necessarily like this like bigot that hates gay people. In fact, he served gay people all the time. He said he would sell them just a normal cake, but he wasn't going to engage in kind of the whole wedding decorational stuff like because he personally didn't believe that was a thing that he wanted to engage in like his personal conscience again whether right or wrong his personal conscience led him to say I don't want to do that and I think in a truly empathetic society I think maybe possibly both sides might be a little bit more understanding of the other side because while I may not have seen much understanding from Jack Phillips perspective but with the gay couples I also didn't hear much empathy for Jack's perspective too. It was basically, no, he won't serve us. Screw that guy. We're gonna take his business. Like we're gonna take his money. Like like screw him. Like that's basically the opposing perspective there. So there's not a lot of empathy there either. So don't expect me to have much empathy for you if you won't have empathy for
But
for
they
someone
were
else. So
the
that's a
first
that's a
ones.
case.
They
Do
set
what?
the precedent. They set the precedent that says that I will serve my cakes to certain people, but not these people. And that's what made us not empathize with them as much because they did it first. They were setting the precedent. They were violating the universal imperative. They were violating that by saying I will sell cakes to everybody but these types of people,
What?
and so that causes us all to, and this is why
Who
this
are they?
always comes back on you. Always when you have bigotry like that, it's gonna, because if you have permission to say that I don't, again, like I don't care as much about how these people feel as I do, then that gives everybody else permission to do that same thing against you. That's why it's important to always try to empathize, because it gives permission to everybody to not empathize with you because you're not empathizing with somebody first. You see what I'm saying? Like they were the first ones to say, I'm not gonna sell a cake, a wedding cake specifically, because I don't believe that these people should be allowed to get married, which is fucked up. Like people should just be. I mean, that's mean. Like that's just a bad position to take. No matter, like, it's basically like if like me and Nikki went into a cake shop and they're like, "Hey, you guys are a mixed couple. I don't, you guys shouldn't be getting married because y'all are from different cultures and stuff. So you shouldn't be allowed to get married." And then expecting empathy back? What? Are you serious? After doing that, after saying that not having empathy for us in our situation, you expect empathy for you? Like you're the one that
Well, yeah.
started
Well,
this. You see
Yeah,
what I'm
well,
saying? Like,
I get your general point, but a couple comments on it. Like, so first off, the premise that you are subscribing to is basically mutually assured destruction. It's basically the eye for an eye makes the whole world blind type of premise, right? So that's problematic in and of itself. But the Jack
kind of.
Phillips thing specifically, his whole premise was not that he wouldn't sell cakes to gay people, gay couples. Is that he would sell them a cake. So he wasn't going to do he wasn't going to do the gay decorations on it. He's like you somebody else can do that because that violates it violates a premise that guy believed
But he
that he
wasn't.
shouldn't engage in.
They weren't
He shouldn't.
say they was just because there were. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's because there was two of the husbands on the top of it. That was what he tried to make the sticking point, right? Is that what you're
Well,
referring
so
to?
yeah, that
Because
he
it
yeah,
wasn't the rest of the decorate. I mean, it was just a wedding cake, but it had two male people on top, and he couldn't put that one figurine next to the other figurine because he didn't think that they should be allowed societally to get married, right?
sure,
So, which
and
they
we
were
yeah,
allowed to do legally, right? But
sure.
he just felt that those people should not be allowed to get married to one another. So he started this. He kind of, and it's a snowball effect. Like once you say, I think that you should have your rights limited, then you can't really expect any empathy out of that afterwards because you're not showing empathy yourself. Therefore, you have set a precedent in reality that nobody should have empathy for you and your situation.
Sure. Well, and also too, like I think it's one thing to get into the whole argument about like actually trying to physically uh, prevent gay people from getting married because I mean I personally don't have an issue with it. Like I'm very libertarian conservative in that sense, and I think there's even a somewhat a traditionalist conservative perspective that can be taken on the whole gay marriage thing. Which and I'll just go ahead and present this argument.
Sure.
So the conservative argument for gay marriage would go something like this. It would be that marriage is good for the individual and good for the society because marriage is a commitment and it matures the individual and it's also good from the social standpoint because it creates stability, right? It creates like stability and it also probably limits sexual promiscuity in some sense. At least people who are at least serious about their marital commitments, right? Like you're not out running around. You're not out running around, spreading STDs and sleeping with a bunch of strangers. You're committed to that one person.
It also
So the arg-
it adds a
yeah,
level
so
of desperation too that people can take advantage of you more because they know you've got a family that you have to take care of. So therefore, businesses and stuff can go, hey, you got to work. I don't care, like whatever. They can take advantage any way they can because they know you need this job because you got a family, dude. So I mean, you could look at it from that perspective as well. But go on, what you were saying.
um, yeah, we can come back to that because I'm not exactly sure what point you're making there, but
I'm saying that's why societally we'd want to like have families so that we could have people that are in need that have to provide for a family so that way these businesses can take advantage of them. So that's why they would lobby to have the government prioritize family. But anyway, go on.
yeah. So, anyways, just the essential argument there is that the question then becomes: Does the same arguments apply to gay couples as well? You know, does stability is stability good for gay couples? You know those types of commitments good for gay couples? Does it does it create more mature people? I think marriage, even though I'm not married, I recognize that marriage does I think matures people in a positive way. So I think all of those arguments that apply to straight people also apply to gay people. So that would be the conservative argument for gay marriage, actually, which I think more and more conservatives these days are open to that premise. So that's kind of my perspective. But also I also too believe, as a conservative, believe in kind of maximal freedoms of businesses within certain reasonable parameters, but also think I don't think individuals and business, agree with them or not. I don't believe they should be forced to violate kind of certain fundamental beliefs, as long as we're not talking about something that's like actually there's some physical harm that's actually being committed there. So yeah, that's something to consider as well.
Hmm. Yeah. No, like earlier we were talking about like some people's feelings are valid and some aren't. And I feel like the feeling of going, I'm not allowed to put two male figurines at my place of work where I provide cakes for everybody. Every human that walks in the door should be able to get a cake, if they want it. I mean, if just one of them came in and was just like just a random person was like, I want two men figurines on top, uh, you know, and it's not even for a wedding. It's just whatever. Like it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? The point is you provide a service for people, right? And
Well, here, sorry, gone.
oh, sorry. No, but and I don't know. I just feel like that's the service that you provide for everybody, right? And so like it makes it really difficult when somebody's like, "Oh, but my, religion that, I believe in or whatever says that I can't do that." And it's like, "Well, then okay, then you probably shouldn't have a wedding cake shop, dude. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like if you can't provide your
Well,
service for
okay, so I
everybody, what's the point?"
I I very much recognize that that is the quintessential left wing view, and I sort of I'll be a little more
It's capitalism, man. It's
I'll be a little
capitalism,
more.
bro.
I'm going to be a little more aggressive with this statement than with some of my previous statements. Like I have contempt for that view, quite frankly, and the reason why is it presents this kind of this whole kind of like um, you we're going to set up, we want you to do as we want you to do, type of thing. And what you okay? And here's really where it comes down. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but really where it comes down to is that conservatives believe that fundamentally that you do not have the right to my services. I don't have the right to provide you, or yeah, you don't have the right to be provided with my services. Fundamentally, I have the right to control how I want to dictate my services, because and I don't want to get this isn't a straw man, by the way. This is just kind of me poking fun of it,
Yeah,
of the whole like my body my choice thing. It's like
yeah,
what happened to it's like the whole my body my choice thing kind of goes out the window when we get away from the abortion issue, right? It's like, oh, my body and my body my choice. It's my body. If I don't want to, it's my business. It's my body. If I don't want to if I don't want to make this wedding cake for you for whatever reason, that's my prerogative. It's my property. It's both my body and my property. And to me, that's so reasonable, and it's so liberty based, and it's so fundamentally American. And I just really hate people that want to tear that apart.
yeah. I mean, like, and I understand that, but you do see the difference between a woman that's just alive and somebody who has chosen to create a business to provide a service to the public. You get that, right? That there's a
No,
difference
you
there.
don't
That's
fundamentally create a
a
business to
false
provide a service to the
equivalency
public. You
at the
fundamentally
very
create
least.
people create businesses to make money for themselves. That's that. And now it is a by the service
But it's not
is a
just being alive. Is my point. Like a woman has the right to choose what happens to her body because she's just being alive. You know what I
what
mean? And a business has made a choice to do something to get revenue, right? And put themselves into the public market to go, hey, if you want this service, come here. That's different, man. Like, it's a false equivalency any way you shake it. Like
well there's
the
well it's
personal
only
autonomy versus somebody who owns a business. And
wait. How is my choice? Okay, let me use the. So I'm out of water here, but like just kind of use an example. Okay, like should I have the autonomous choice whether or not to to what I okay this is my glass, right? Like I paid for the glass, like
sure,
should I have the autonomous choice? What I do with this glass is the if you say you can only do X, Y, and Z with this glass and not A, B, and C, you do recognize that you're at least fundamentally limiting my ability to make autonomous choices in terms of what I do with this glass, right?
sure.
Okay.
And I would say, yeah, but I feel like the parameters around you, what you do with that glass, are different
Sure,
between.
it's different. I mean, everything's different. There's nothing that's exactly the same. You know, I mean, I think
Yeah,
it's
and
yeah. So
ignoring the nuance would be silly, right?
I'm not talking about ignoring the nuance. I was just making a jab at this whole
Because
like
if
if you're
you
gonna
wanted to
make the
break that glass and stab somebody with it, I'd say no, that's wrong. That's harmful, and you shouldn't do that. You can, and you
right,
could say that violates my bodily autonomy, right? But that's
like I
not
shouldn't be able to
actually.
stab. I shouldn't be able to stab a fetus with my glass, right?
You shouldn't be able to stab a person, but if that thing, if that thing is inside of you, I mean, I would recommend they don't do that. Uh, Honestly, I would recommend they don't break a glass and stab themselves in the stomach to get rid of the fetus. But the fact that we know that people have done things like that, and again, I'm a consequentialist, and we know that when those rights are illegal, that a black market moves in and it's not safe for them, and then they end up going to prison because they were a dope head, suffering from a mental health illness, of drug addiction, and then having a miscarriage and go to prison for fucking murder because they didn't know they were pregnant while using drugs. And I think that those consequences go, no, we should not have this as a thing. you know
I don't
what
hear
I mean?
I don't hear anybody trying to make the argument that you should be prosecuted and sent to prison if you use drugs while pregnant, and then there's
That happens. There's a woman
as
in
the
prison
consequence.
right now.
I'm not I'm not
For
saying
murder.
there are zero. I'm not saying there are zero people that make that argument. I don't know of any conservatives personally that are making that argument. Like there may be a few, like but yeah, the abortion issue is a fundamentally different one.
But yeah, but
Uh,
I mean, my point still stands that, like, that you can't, fundamentally different. Like what the natural processes of your body are fundamentally different from whether or not you want to run an establishment to sell a product to the public. I feel like
but
these things are so different that there's so much nuance between each one that it's a terrible comparison, no offense.
Well, it's not a direct. So I think you're misunderstanding the point. It's not. It's not at all a direct
That's
comparison.
possible.
I'm not. I'm not comparing A to B. What I'm doing, what I did there with that little thing there, is I was pointing out the hypocrisy of the. So the people that make the "my body, my choice" argument, it's basically an argument of political convenience, right? It's like they'll make it. They're willing to make that argument when it fits their political desires, and then they completely back away from it when it doesn't fit their political desires, right? So all I was doing is pointing out the fact that like people are willing to make that specific argument when it fits how the political ends that they want, and they completely back away from it when it doesn't. That's what I was saying.
Okay. I mean, that's just odd because that felt like exactly what you were doing. It was convenient to use that argument at the same time. Like, I mean, to say,
No, I was pointing out the hypocrisy of somebody else's argument.
right.
I'm
Wow.
saying what I'm saying is apply if you're going to apply the argument, apply it consistently, and you're not going to you at least thus far you have not caught me applying that argument inconsistently. I'm pointing out how other people apply it inconsistently. That's what I was doing.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Let's just say fair enough. I man, it's going on 3 o'clock where I'm at. And but
Okay.
they
All right, another good chat.
this was fun though. I always like I said, I love these kind of conversations and stuff. It gets my brain juices moving and stuff, and I feel like I need that more and more these days. So I appreciate
Yeah,
you.
and I think people who disagree need to talk more and more these days too.
I'd
It
agree.
helps understand because it's we need to. I don't mind disagreeing with people. It's people either it's when people really completely don't understand that. I find that I run into a lot of people that like they don't understand even what the best conservative arguments are because they don't really face them. They don't really hear them, and so I like to
Yeah, because
get in
it's
front
just
of people
weird.
who
Because I'm online making an argument, and I'm like willing to, and I just get blocked more than anything. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Like I thought you guys were against canceling people. Like it's weird.
right.
But no, yeah, I agree. I think that people, and I think doing it the way that we're doing it is more what should happen. Because I feel like a lot this gets it's a snark off, competition, and it just drives me nuts because I try to be honest with people, like okay, and I try to have conversations online and just like try to put myself out there as like, look, I can make mistakes, like, and I'll admit when I make mistakes, be like, no, that's not true because of this, and I'll be like, oh shit, and I'll even do screenshots to show them how I realized that they were actually right about a particular thing or whatever. Go, man, you were right about this, but at the same time, you're not recognizing this, and this, whatever. Like, but I feel like that just the gate that's up, the keyboard that's in the way, I feel like messes it up, you know,
For sure.
because what we're doing. I just feel like it's better, man. I feel like we humanize each other almost automatically, and that just doesn't happen online. Like you're just like, this guy's a piece of shit, and you're literally picturing a dumpster fire of a
Fucking
person.
snowflakes.
Yeah, there are
Fucking live hard snowflakes.
Yeah. Oh my god, how many times have I been called that? It's amazing. But yeah. So I honestly wish people would do more and more do it. But the more I like try to do it, the more people don't like they shut down. Like that's why I put that at the beginning of the show of like the Catholic dude, and I hate calling them that because I can't remember their name, but I remember Catholic was in the name. But uh I like that they want to talk to me, that they actually want to speak, because that's just so unusual in this day and age, and what we're doing. Everybody just wants to be snarky online.
Yeah.
It's that's shitty. That doesn't get us anywhere. That's just going to make the other side double down, no matter who you are, or just block you, you know, or they'll be snarky and then block. I don't know. I don't know how people do what they do, but But thanks so much for coming on, man. I really do appreciate it. We should definitely have got. I didn't realize that you were, I thought that because you were on vacation, that's why I was like, let me just throw this out there. See how late can you stay up, man? What's up? And I kind of thought maybe it was just because you were on vacation. So it's cool that you said that. No, you're always up to slate, right?
Yeah, often.
Cool, man. Well, we'll definitely have to do a couple more of these then. and if
Yeah,
hey,
sounds good.
and if you know anybody that might want to talk or do like what we're doing, and send them my way.
Okay, yeah, will do. I'll think about that.
All right, cool, man. Well, you have
All
a great
right.
night. All right,
All
get some
right, you too.
sleep. It's late. Doing. But that was my conversation with Dallas. I feel like it went okay. I tried to make some points, and I don't know. I kind of halfway between. Like the last one, I was very happy with. I'll say that. This one, I'm sort of halfway between. I have no idea if I did okay or not. But thank you, X from Utah Outcasts, and you should all go watch Utah Outcasts because it's fucking awesome. And check out the Lil Nas X video. Check that out. Probably already have. It's all right. But thanks for chilling. He was playing word games. You were absolutely right, X. That's why I was trying to break that down for him, but seemed to be uh, foregone. I don't know. It wasn't working. All right, buddy. Take it easy, man. Thanks for watching. And until next time. All right. Jesus Christ. I gotta get a sign off.